What if your thoughts were never truly yours? What if every choice you've ever made, every desire, every fear, was carefully planted in your mind by someone who understood the science of control? This is dark psychology, the hidden language of manipulation, persuasion, and influence that operates beneath your awareness. In the next few minutes, you'll discover how it works, who uses it, and why it's far more common than you think. Welcome to the shadows of the human mind. Direct hit before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to learn will change the way you see people forever. Introduction to the shadows of the human. If you've ever wondered why good people do questionable things in the right pressure and the right moment, the answer is simple and terrifying. The human mind is a battlefield, and most of that war happens quietly in the dark. Let's begin gently, as if we're standing at the edge of a forest at dusk, listening to the world settle into night. In that dim light, our vision softens, our hearing sharpens, and small movements feel large. This is the state our ancestors lived in for thousands of years. Half-lit, alert, negotiating risk and reward with limited information and high stakes. Before there were books, laws, or even speech as we know it, there was a need to survive. That need did not just sharpen our senses. It shaped our psychology. And in that shaping, it planted the roots of what we now call dark psychology. The study of manipulation, coercion, deception, and control, behaviors born not of evil alone, but of survival itself. It's important to say this clearly at the start. Dark psychology is not fantasy, nor is it a villain's handbook. It is a map of human tendencies, yours, mine, everyone's, under pressure, in groups, across time. It exists not on the fringes of science, but across it, in evolutionary biology, in cognitive psychology, in social dynamics and game theory, in studies of obedience and influence, and in the quiet observations of therapists who know how often pain hides behind politeness. If persuasion is the gentle art of aligning interests, dark psychology is what happens when survival, status, or fear is on the line. Not all influence is manipulation, but all manipulation is influence tuned for control. That distinction matters. Consider the earliest human tribes. Food was scarce. Safety was uncertain. The group was everything. Under those conditions, people learned how to read each other quickly and strategically. You could posture to look stronger than you felt. You could praise to earn protection, gossip to remove a rival, threaten, withdraw, or withhold to bend others to your will. These patterns were not random, they produced results. Those who managed attention, emotion, and expectation effectively often survived and passed on their strategies in subtle ways. Children copied parents. Apprentices copied leaders. Stories rewarded cunning as often as kindness. The wolf and the shepherd both lived in us, and each had its day. Fast forward to civilization, and you find the same dynamics dressed in different clothes. The Greeks warned about sophists who could make the weaker argument appear stronger. The Romans spoke candidly of power and public opinion. Later, a Florentine civil servant named Niccolò Machiavelli looked at the world as it was, not as it should be, and dared to write it down. People judge by appearances. Fear can be more reliable than love if you cannot secure both. You must learn not to be good in the pure, simple sense if you want to survive the game of power. He did not invent manipulation. He described it. And in doing so, he offended those who wanted comfort more than clarity. But dark psychology is bigger than political counsel. When Sigmund Freud peeled back the polite curtain and found drives, defenses, and the unconscious, he showed us that we are not the sole rulers of our minds. When B.F. Skinner showed how behavior could be shaped by reinforcement and punishment, he introduced a language of control that now motivates everything from gambling machines to social media feeds. Later, Stanley Milgram revealed how ordinary people could obey harmful orders under the right authority, while Philip Zimbardo dramatized how roles and environments can transform conduct. And then came Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who showed that our thinking is riddled with biases. We cling to first impressions, anchoring. We see patterns in noise, apophenia. We seek confirmation of what we already believe. Together, these figures didn't teach us how to be worse. They explained why, under pressure, we often are. So how does dark psychology differ from ordinary influence? Think of influence as a conversation. You want something, I want something, and we negotiate. ideally with respect, transparency, and consent. Good influence clarifies. It doesn't confuse. It makes options visible. It doesn't hide them. It asks, what would help both of us? Dark psychology, in contrast, distorts the field. It exploits blind spots. It suppresses options. It nudges you with unseen hands toward a conclusion you believe is yours, though it never was. It uses fear, shame, guilt, scarcity, urgency, and identity to hijack your decision-making. It treats your attention as a resource to be captured, your emotions as levers to be pulled, and your uncertainty as a door to walk through. Sometimes it looks like a hard sell. Sometimes it looks like a lover's silence. Sometimes it looks like a friendly app reminding you to come back again and again until you forget what you came for. Notice something crucial here. Dark psychology is not only about villains. It is also about systems, about incentives that reward attention capture, about platforms that learn your cravings better than you know them yourself, about institutions that normalize power imbalances in the name of efficiency or tradition. It's about the parts of us that cooperate with those systems because they offer what we are built to want: belonging, significance, certainty, relief. When you scroll, you are not weak. You are human. When you stay silent, you are not a coward. You are calculating cost. When you agree to something you do not want, you are not broken. You are choosing the least dangerous path you can see. Dark psychology maps these choices and names the forces that narrow your vision. Where did the term itself come from? Dark psychology is not a single founding paper or a neat textbook category. It's a synthesis, a banner under which researchers, clinicians, and commentators gather ideas about coercion, deceit, and manipulation. It draws from forensic psychology, where the so-called dark triad of personality, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy was identified as a cluster associated with callousness and strategic exploitation. It borrows from social psychology's robust literature on obedience, conformity, and persuasion. It borrows from behavioral economics insights into cognitive bias and choice architecture. And it borrows from communication theory, marketing, and even stage magic, because if you want to understand attention, it helps to study those who catch it for a living. The term dark is a metaphor, not a moral decree. It signals our focus on what is hidden, the covert, the implicit, the unspoken rules beneath the polite surface. Why does this matter now more than ever? Because we live in an age where the levers of influence have been industrialized. In the village, manipulation required proximity. In the empire, it required scale. In the digital world, it requires data and design. Algorithms do not have intentions, but they serve those who do. Every click is a teacher, and the machine is an attentive student, learning which stories make you furious, which thumbnails make you curious, which times of night your resolve is weakest, which social cues trigger fear of missing out. The result is a personalized attention trap so smooth that it feels like freedom, and that is the most sophisticated manipulation of all. The kind you experience as choice. Understanding this does not make you cynical. It makes you awake. It gives you language where before you had only discomfort. Something is off here, but I can't explain it. Language is power. When you can name a tactic, you can slow it down. When you can see the frame, you can step outside it. When you can describe the incentive, you can predict the move. This is not about living suspiciously. It's about living consciously, choosing your attention the way you choose your food, aware that not everything offered is nourishment. And yet we need more than awareness. We need compassion, for others and for ourselves. Manipulation thrives in shame and secrecy. It grows where people are afraid to admit they were deceived. It grows where victims feel foolish and fall silent. But here is a truth I want you to hold. Anyone can be manipulated if the timing and technique are right. The most intelligent among us are sometimes the most vulnerable, because confidence in one's own judgment is a bias of its own. The goal is not to become hard. It is to become soft and strong, soft enough to remain human, strong enough to draw clear boundaries and ask better questions before we say yes. Who, then, helped build this understanding across history? We can honor a wide range of voices without turning any of them into saints. Machiavelli chronicled power without flinching. Freud explored the drives and defenses beneath our masks. Skinner taught us to watch for rewards and schedules that keep us hooked. Milgram and Zimbardo revealed how quickly context can corrupt. Leon Festinger showed how we resolve dissonance, often by justifying what hurts us rather than confronting it. Robert Cialdini organized principles of influence: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, many of which can be used ethically or not, depending on intent. Kahneman and Tversky mapped the shortcuts and illusions that speed up thinking but sometimes lead it astray. More recent researchers have added discussions of dark personality traits, emotional abuse patterns, gaslighting, trauma bonding, and cult dynamics. Each contribution is a lens, and together they offer a mosaic. The picture is not complete, but it is clear enough to change how you move through the world. You might wonder, if dark psychology is rooted in evolution and culture, is it inevitable? Are we doomed to manipulate and be manipulated? The simple answer is no, but the honest answer is complicated. The capacity is inevitable. Its dominance is not. We all use influence. We all manage impressions. We all decide which truths to share and which to hold back. The ethical line is drawn at consent and care. Are you increasing the other person's freedom or reducing it? Are you offering clarity or fog? Are you protecting their agency or preying on their uncertainty? These are quiet tests, but they create loud outcomes over time. Entire relationships rise or collapse based on the answers. Let's talk about the promise of this journey, what you will discover as we go deeper. First, you will learn to recognize the patterns. Not just the obvious tactics, the hard sell, the guilt trip, the public pressure, but the subtle ones. How someone reframes your memory, how a group shapes your sense of what is normal, how deadlines get tighter while your options get smaller, how disclosure, oversharing, can be a net thrown across your empathy to pull you into obligations you did not agree to. Second, you will learn the inner moves that make you safer. The pause between feeling and action. The habit of reality checking with a neutral third party. The discipline of asking for time. The skill of naming what you sense without accusing. I feel rushed. I need to think. I'm hearing a lot of urgency but not a clear reason. These are small sentences with big consequences. Third, you will see how systems, workplaces, families, institutions can be designed to reduce manipulation, not by expecting angels but by assuming humans. Transparency, clear incentives, accessible feedback, and shared language are not luxuries. They are psychological seatbelts. We will also confront a painful mirror: the ways we manipulate without noticing. The white lies we tell to keep the peace that slowly erase our boundaries. The strategic silences we use to punish the people we love. The promises we make when we're afraid to disappoint. The posts we craft to harvest validation. The narratives we spin to avoid responsibility. I had no choice, when what we had was a hard choice. There is no shame in recognizing this. The shame is in refusing to see it. The point of this work is not to play purity politics. It is to build capacity, to strengthen your ability to choose honesty, to choose clarity, to choose alignment between your values and your actions even when manipulation would be easier in the short term. In modern life, the battlefield is not only public. It is personal. Advertisers hawk certainty. Political campaigns sell identity. Influencers trade in borrowed intimacy. Apps insert themselves between you and your own rhythms. In this landscape, understanding dark psychology is not merely protective. It is liberating. It frees your attention so you can direct it where it matters. Relationships that can tolerate truth, projects that deserve your time, communities built on mutual regard rather than spectacle. It teaches you how to be influenced without being owned. It helps you become the kind of person whose yes means yes because it isn't squeezed out of you, and whose no means no because it is offered without rage. A word about humility before we close. The mind you're bringing to the subject is not a flawless instrument. It is quick, biased, associative, proud, and deeply social. It is also capable of reflection, revision, courage, and love. The task is not to root out every bias. That's impossible. The task is to create enough light inside that when the shadows move, you notice. Enough space between stimulus and response that you can turn down the volume on panic and turn up the signal of your deeper values. Enough self-respect to leave a room where your agency is being extracted one compliment, one deadline, one guilt trip at a time. Enough compassion to forgive yourself when you miss it, learn, and try again. So, here is what this journey, will offer you. We'll track the origins of manipulation from survival strategies to sophisticated psychological warfare. We'll clarify how dark psychology differs from ordinary persuasion by focusing on intention, consent, and the visibility of choice. We'll meet the thinkers who mapped this terrain, not to worship them, but to use their lenses. We'll connect ancient patterns to modern platforms, showing how old instincts are exploited by new technologies. And we'll give you practical language and habits to see, to name, and to choose, a toolkit not to dominate others, but to remain yourself in environments designed to make that difficult. I want you to notice your body right now, the breath, the shoulders, the small ways we brace when we feel watched, evaluated, or sold a story. You are not alone in that sensation. Every person you meet is negotiating visibility and control. We are not here to strip that away, but to offer a kinder alternative. Relationships where influence is honest, institutions where power is accountable, communities where attention is respected, and a self that you can live with at night. If there's a single paradox to carry forward, let it be this. The more clearly you see the dark, the less it controls you, and the more capacity you have for the light. Awareness does not make you cold. It makes you warm and wise. Boundaries do not make you hard. They make you safe enough to be gentle. Skepticism does not make you bitter. It makes you free enough to be generous without being fooled. Tonight, as we step away from this opening and toward the deeper chapters, remember, manipulation thrives in the unexamined moment. So give yourself the gift of a pause. When something feels off, let that feeling be a teacher. When you encounter charm, ask what it is asking of you. When urgency reaches for your throat, reach for a question. And when you find yourself tempted to bend someone else's will, ask whether there is a truth you are avoiding, a fear you can face without turning another person into a tool. The shadows of the human mind are not our enemy. They are our inheritance. We can pretend they aren't there, and they will guide us anyway. Or we can learn their shapes, trace their boundaries, and in doing so, discover that even in low light, our steps can be deliberate. The path ahead will not make the world safer overnight, but it will make you steadier within it. And sometimes that is how safety begins. One clear mind, one honest choice, one refusal to be rushed into forgetting who you are. Section 2. The Anatomy of Manipulation. If you want to understand why people move the way they do, don't start with their words. Start with their fear. The heart negotiates before the tongue ever speaks. Let's step slowly into this room together. The one most of us avoid until we're hurt. The room where power, control, and fear sit at the same table and quietly decide the direction of our lives. Manipulation is not always a monster with sharp teeth. Often it's a soft hand on your shoulder, a tone that sounds reasonable, a question that appears innocent. It is the subtle architecture around your choices that makes one door look bright and the other look dangerous. When we talk about the anatomy of manipulation, we are not talking about the rare villain. We are talking about ordinary human dynamics under pressure, how we pull, how we push, how we lean on each other's buttons to get the world to bend a little closer to what we want. At the core lies power, not as a cartoonish crown, but as the ability to shape outcomes. Control is simply the method, how I influence you, how I manage your options, how I frame the story. Fear is the engine. Sometimes it's primal, the fear of loss, rejection, humiliation, poverty, insignificance. Sometimes it's sophisticated, the fear of being wrong in public, of wasting time, of choosing badly when the stakes are high. When someone manipulates, they do not need to overpower you. They just need to make one fear louder than your other values. If they can amplify that fear by words, by silence, by timing, you will often move yourself. That is the cleanest manipulation. Not to shove, but to arrange. We are all wired with emotional triggers. Small switches that turn the lights on or off in our decision-making. Praise can be a switch. So can disappointment, urgency, scarcity, guilt, flattery, obligation, belonging, authority. Each can tilt the floor. The mind, clever as it is, prefers speed to accuracy when emotions run high. It leans on shortcuts to save energy. We call these shortcuts cognitive biases, and they are not moral flaws. They are survival tools that work well enough in most situations but can be gamed when someone knows where to press. When a salesperson sets an offer expires tonight frame, they are recruiting scarcity and loss aversion. When a politician stands surrounded by flags and notable figures, they are recruiting authority and social proof. When a partner says, "If you loved me, you would," they are recruiting conditional belonging and guilt. None of these tactics are new. What's new is how often we meet them in a single day. Consider confirmation bias, the tendency to seek, notice, and remember information that agrees with what we already believe. If I want to move you without resistance, I can simply present my message wrapped in your existing worldview. I'll quote the voices you trust. I'll use the phrases your group uses. I'll make the right enemies. You won't feel manipulated. You'll feel validated. Manipulation rarely tries to change your mind directly. It seduces your mind to change itself while believing it stayed the same. Anchoring bias does similar work. The first number you hear becomes the reference point. If I want you to buy at 50, I start by mentioning 100. Your discount is a frame. The product didn't get cheaper. Your baseline got higher. The halo effect helps me too. If I can look competent in one domain, beauty, status, eloquence, you might, without noticing, grant me credibility in another. You're not foolish for doing this, you're efficient. The world is too complex to evaluate everything from scratch. But efficiency has a price when someone designs your shortcuts. We often think of empathy as a shield that protects us from harming others, and in a healthy world, it is. But empathy, our capacity to mirror feelings, to resonate with another's internal state, can also be used as a tool of control. We are social creatures with mirror neurons that fire when we watch another person act or emote. This is part of how children learn, part of why yawns spread, part of how moods travel through rooms like weather. A skilled manipulator pays close attention to your microreactions, your eyes, your breath, your posture. They mirror your tempo and tone, building rapport. They echo your word choices, borrowing your map of meaning to travel toward their goal. Empathy becomes a key that opens your nervous system. If they reflect your frustration, you feel seen. If they reflect your joy, you feel safe. Once that resonance is established, small suggestions slip past your defenses. People like us do things like this. They'll imply, and your desire to remain congruent with the emotional bubble you share makes the suggestion feel less like a command and more like a natural next step. Tools are not evil. They answer to the hand that holds them. Empathy in the service of care heals. Empathy in the service of control binds. Another layer of the anatomy is reinforcement. The simple, powerful logic of reward and punishment. Human behavior is plastic. It bends toward what gets rewarded and away from what gets punished, often without a conscious narrative. This is why intermittent rewards are so addictive. If a slot machine paid every time, it would be boring. If it paid rarely, you'd stop. But when it pays unpredictably, infrequently, and right when you're about to give up, it trains your hope like a muscle. Many relationships, romantic, familial, professional, fall into reinforcement schedules without anyone naming it. Affection withheld after dissent, attention flooded after compliance, small gifts following silence, sulking after boundary setting. These patterns teach you what is safe to say and what is costly. Over time, you stop making conscious choices. You develop reflexes. Your body anticipates the reward or the punishment and moves first. To change such a pattern, one must interrupt the schedule, refuse to be trained by inconsistent rewards, refuse to pay the tax that follows honesty. That refusal feels risky because, in a sense, you will lose some approval. But you regain your agency, and that is the kind of reward that stabilizes you for the long run. Let's bring this from theory to daily life. In sales, manipulation often appears as a friendly guide who has already mapped the path you are meant to take. The script is simple. Create rapport by mirroring, discover a pain point, agitate the pain with stories, present the product as the relief, frame the price against a larger anchor, add urgency, reduce perceived risk with guarantees, and close, ideally with a small yes that leads to a bigger yes. None of this is evil by default. People need products and guidance. But intent matters and transparency matters. When the pressure to close overrides the respect for your freedom, persuasion crosses into manipulation. You can feel it in your body. A slight constriction, a narrowing of options, a sense that if you don't decide right now you will be punished by loss, shame, or disappointment. That feeling is not paranoia. It's your early warning system. In relationships, manipulation can look like love with a ledger. Care becomes conditional, warmth becomes currency, intimacy becomes leverage. The tactics are often quiet. The cold shoulder that follows a boundary, the sudden, dramatic affection after you comply, the revising of shared history to cast doubt on your memory, the skillful "I was only joking" after a cruel remark. This is where gaslighting lives, not always as a grand conspiracy, but as repeated denials of your reality until you begin to use the other person's reactions as your mirror instead of your own senses. The antidote is not to become stubborn. It is to cultivate your own internal references. Notes, timelines, conversations with neutral parties, a journal of how your body responded before the debate began. You don't need to win the argument, you need to keep your footing. In politics, manipulation scales. Emotional triggers are tested like product features. Slogans compress complex issues into rhythmic certainties that bypass the need for nuance. Enemies are manufactured or magnified because nothing bonds a crowd like a common threat. Social identity, the powerful story of who we are, becomes the main lever. We accept bad behavior from our side more easily than from the other because we are protecting belonging, not adjudicating facts. Again, this is human. But it becomes dangerous when leaders learn to keep their followers in a permanent state of alarm, because fear clouds the mind and makes radical promises sound like lifelines. A wise citizen learns to notice when rhetoric offers catharsis without clarity, when outrage is harvested without offering a path to repair, when loyalty is demanded as proof of goodness rather than earned through competence and accountability. In religion, which at its best can heal and anchor, manipulation can arise when authority hardens and curiosity is treated as rebellion. When a leader claims a special pipeline to truth that cannot be questioned, when dissent is framed as moral failure, when confession is weaponized, when guilt is the primary motivator. These are signs that spiritual influence may have slipped into control. You can tell by the fruit it bears. Fear of leaving, fear of asking, fear of reading, fear of friends outside the circle. A faith that must be protected from questions will require constant policing. A faith that trusts truth can survive honest inquiry will cultivate humility. Again, the tools are not the enemy. Ritual, community, myth, discipline, these are human goods. It is the intent and structure that decide whether they free a soul or cage it. We should also distinguish between overt and covert manipulation. Overt manipulation is loud. Threats, orders, shaming, public pressure. You see the lever and you feel the push. It's ugly, but it is at least visible. Covert manipulation wears charm. It builds a story in which you, without noticing, play the role the manipulator needs. The compliment that tunes your ear to praise. The vulnerability that buys your trust before it is earned. The gentle appeal to your identity. You're such a generous person. So that saying no feels like betraying yourself. Covert manipulation often arrives dressed as your values. That's why it's hard to spot and even harder to confront without looking cruel. You do not need to be cruel. You can simply realign the frame. I appreciate the kind words. I still need to think. You return the responsibility to where it belongs. Not to your identity, but to your judgment. Some people worry that learning this language will make them cold, suspicious, unable to enjoy the simple goodness of human connection. But the opposite tends to be true. When you can name tactics, you can relax because you have options. You can slow a conversation without apologizing. You can ask for time without guilt. You can listen to praise without needing to repay it. You can recognize that urgency is not the same as importance. Confidence grows from competence, and competence in this context means skillful recognition. The ability to see the lever and decide whether to step away or to engage on your terms. Let's look inside the manipulator too, not to excuse, but to understand. People reach for control because they are afraid. They learn somewhere that asking directly won't work, that need is shameful, that the world is a marketplace where only pressure yields results. They learned that love is conditional and that safety lives on the other side of someone else's yes. These are not always conscious lessons. Sometimes they are generational habits braided into the family story. We survive by pleasing, by intimidating, by never admitting fault, by keeping score. If you have used manipulation, and most of us have in small ways, it does not mean you are broken. It means you were trained. You can be retrained. You can say what you want and accept that a clean no is better than a coerced yes. You can build relationships that don't rely on fear or fog. You can replace the rush of control with the steadier reward of trust. Part of retraining is learning to hear your internal early warnings. Your body often knows before your mind. A sudden tightness in your chest when choices are presented. A spike of anxiety when your boundary is about to be tested. A strange relief that feels like surrender when someone takes over your decision. These sensations are data. They don't always mean danger, but they mean you should slow down. Ask yourself simple questions. What is being offered? What is being threatened? What fear is being amplified? Who benefits from my rush? If I said, I need a day, what happens next? Honest influence can tolerate time. Manipulation cannot. It needs the heat of the moment. It needs you to act before you think. Cooling the room is a skill. You can practice it in small places. At the store, on a website, in a conversation with a friend. The habit scales. Another quiet skill is reframing guilt. People who care are easy to move by guilt, and manipulators often count on that. But there is a difference between healthy guilt, which alerts you when you have violated your values, and manufactured guilt, which appears when you simply didn't give someone what they wanted. The first asks for repair. The second asks for obedience. When you feel guilty, ask, did I do harm, or did I disappoint? If all you did was disappoint, you can be kind without surrendering your choice. You can say, I hear that you're upset. I'm still not available. This is not coldness. It is respect for two realities at once. Theirs and yours. We should also talk about humor and intimacy, because they are often used as transport. A joke can sneak an insult past your defenses, and then when you protest, you're told you can't take a joke. Here the tactic is plausible deniability. It erases your right to respond by calling your response the problem. The counter is simple and calm. Jokes are supposed to be enjoyable for both people. That didn't feel good. You refuse the frame without escalating. Intimacy works similarly. Rapid disclosure can build a sense of closeness that collapses your caution. This is not always manipulative. Sometimes people simply hunger for connection. But when disclosure is used to buy loyalty or to create a debt, it becomes a leash. You can accept someone's story without giving them your agency in return. If this sounds like a lot to hold, remember that you don't need to master every concept to move more wisely. Small moves make big differences. Pausing before you answer. Asking for specifics when someone speaks in sweeping claims. Naming the feeling in the room without assigning blame. I'm feeling rushed. I make better decisions with time. Checking your facts when you feel outrage surge. Choosing to disappoint rather than resent. These are simple actions, but they reclaim the space manipulation tries to compress. And now, let's turn back to the paradox that opened this chapter. Fear negotiates first. When you know that, you can invite a different negotiator to the table, your values. Fear can propose. Values will decide. You don't need to kill fear. You need to let it speak and then ask it to step aside so you can see more than the nearest exit. In the presence of someone else's manipulation, your values will ask, is there a way to remain kind without giving away my choices? Is there a way to be open without being porous? Is there a way to be generous without making a secret contract I will later regret? These questions return you to yourself. The anatomy of manipulation is not a mystery locked in secret labs. It's visible wherever humans meet. In the kitchen at midnight, in the boardroom at noon, in the comments of a post, in the pulpit on a Sunday, in the whispers of a campaign. Power, control, and fear are not going away. Emotional triggers and cognitive biases will always hum in the background. Our mirror neurons will keep resonating. Our need for belonging will keep pulling. Reward and punishment will keep shaping habits. Overt and covert tactics will keep trading masks. The point is not to eradicate these forces. The point is to recognize them, to play fair when you can, to defend yourself when you must, and to build relationships and systems where honesty is more efficient than pressure. As we end, take a breath. Think of one place in your life where you feel a subtle tilt, as if the floor beneath your choices is slightly slanted. Maybe it's a person you love, a job you need, a community you value, a belief you inherited. Ask the quiet questions. What fear is loudest here? What reward keeps me returning? What punishment do I avoid by staying silent? What story am I borrowing that no longer fits? If you can name even one lever, you are already less movable. If you can choose one small boundary to practice this week, you will feel the difference. Not as a sudden revolution, but as a steadier step. You don't need to be flawless to be free. You need to be attentive, patient, and willing to trade the short-term comfort of agreement for the long-term peace of alignment. The shadows won't vanish, but you will carry your own light into them. And that, more than any trick or tactic, is how manipulation loses its power. In the presence of someone who can feel deeply, think clearly, and still choose gently for themselves. Section 3. The Dark Triad, the Psychology of Predators. When harm comes wearing a smile, it does more than hurt. It teaches you to doubt your eyes. Predators do not begin with fangs. They begin with charm, certainty, and a promise that finally, at last, someone understands you. We need to walk into this with both courage and care. The dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, is not a monster under the bed. It is a set of personality patterns that appear across history, in boardrooms and bedrooms, on stages, and in quiet offices where decisions are made. Most people carry a little of one trait in certain moments. Very few people carry them all, frequently, and with the volume turned high. But those who do tend to bend rooms around them. They dominate, seduce, and control not because they are supernatural, but because they are exquisitely tuned to the levers inside other people. Attention, fear, approval, urgency, belonging. To recognize the triad is not to play armchair clinician. It is to protect your agency in the presence of patterns that harvest it. Let's start with narcissism, not the casual kind we all display when we check the mirror, but the self-obsession that turns every room into a stage and every person into a prop. At its heart lies a hunger for admiration, for specialness, for an echo that never fades. The narcissistic pattern reads the world like a mirror and asks, again and again, what does this say about me? Praise becomes oxygen, criticism becomes a threat, and other people become instruments for restoring a fragile sense of superiority. The paradox is that beneath the grandstanding lives a shaky self that cannot hold itself together without a constant drip of validation. This is why rules bend so easily around the narcissist's needs. If you are in relationship with this pattern, you will feel the subtle tilt. Your victories are reframed as theirs, your hurts are minimized, your attention is taxed. Love feels conditional because it is. Care is traded like currency. Empathy appears when it produces applause and vanishes when it costs too much. There will be apology-scented sentences that do not change behavior, elaborate explanations that center their pain, and sudden acts of generosity timed like a spotlight. You will be admired until you are inconvenient. You will be idealized until you are human. And then, often without warning, you will be devalued for the same qualities that once earned you praise. The cycle is exhausting not because you are weak, but because the rules keep moving. You are not invited into a relationship. You are recruited into a performance. Machiavellianism is different. Where narcissism thirsts for admiration, Machiavellianism thirsts for advantage. It is the cool, strategic mind that treats human interaction like chess, with pieces to maneuver and positions to consolidate. The Machiavellian pattern studies incentives the way a sailor studies wind. It learns who needs approval, who fears conflict, who wants to be seen as generous, who will fold under time pressure, who can be bought with praise or with access. It rehearses sincerity the way an actor rehearses lines, not to fake emotion but to deploy it with precision. Secrets are not confidences. They are collateral. Favors are not kindness. They are investments. Information is power, so it is collected quietly and spent carefully. You will recognize this pattern not by a feeling of chaos, but by a sense that you are always one step behind a narrative someone else seems to be writing. You will find that your choices arrive pre-framed, that dissent is absorbed and repackaged, that your objections are anticipated and neutralized before you articulate them. It can feel like playing a game whose rules no one taught you, except one person who never stops winning. Psychopathy is colder still. It is emotional detachment sharpened into efficiency. Low fear, low shame, low guilt, and a willingness to use people as tools with minimal internal friction. Not all who carry psychopathic traits are violent. Many never raise a hand. Some channel their low reactivity into high-pressure careers where speed and courage are rewarded. But when this detachment mingles with entitlement and callousness, the result is calculated cruelty. People become breakable objects. Suffering becomes a cost of doing business. Remorse becomes a theater for avoiding consequences. Interactions with this pattern can feel uncanny because the usual signals are missing. Apologies carry no weight not because words are wrong, but because there is no weight to carry. Promises are chips on a table, picked up or put down depending on the odds. Empathy is mimicked, not felt, enough to pass casual inspection but not enough to guide behavior when pressure mounts. If you are near this pattern long enough, you will question your expectations of basic human feedback. You will wonder why pain does not register, why boundaries do not land, why harm can be reported in a pleasant tone as if it were weather. Now imagine these three patterns not as separate rooms but as connected hallways. Together they form the dark triad. A matrix where self-obsession feeds strategy, strategy profits from emotional coldness, and coldness shields self-obsession from the embarrassment of remorse. In some people, one leg of the triangle dominates. In others, all three support one another, producing a profile that is charming enough to enter, convincing enough to rise, and ruthless enough to remain. The triad is not merely the sum of its parts. It is an ecosystem. Narcissism captures attention. Machiavellianism converts attention into leverage. Psychopathy discards what is no longer useful without the drag of conscience. When a person runs this stack, they rarely storm doors. They are invited in. They arrive as the solution to a felt problem, an inspiring leader for a tired team, a passionate partner for a lonely heart, a rainmaker for a desperate organization. Only later do you notice that the cost of the solution is your clarity, your autonomy, your sleep. Recognizing these traits in daily life is not about diagnosing strangers or calling people monsters. It is about listening for consistent patterns over time. What is rewarded, what is punished, what happens when you say no. The narcissistic pattern will punish losing the spotlight. The Machiavellian pattern will punish interrupting the script. The psychopathic pattern will punish getting in the way of the outcome. In the early stages, you will see the recruitment. The narcissist recruits with adoration, love bombing, fast intimacy, the sense that you have finally found someone who gets you at a soul level. The Machiavellian recruits with opportunity, inside access, shared secrets, the feeling of being part of the inner circle where the real decisions happen. The psychopath recruits with competence, the calm promise that with them, things will finally be efficient, clean, decisive. Each recruitment fits a hunger in you. That does not make you foolish. It makes you human. Your task is not to distrust your hunger. It is to keep your hands on the wheel while you eat. Daily tells are small and durable. How do they handle a boundary stated calmly? Do they respect time when you ask for it? What happens when praise is not immediate? Are apologies followed by predictable change? Or are they used as keys to unlock another round of the same behavior? Do compliments arrive mainly before requests? Do favors flow both ways, or only toward the center of their need? Is there a gap between how they speak about kindness and how people around them actually feel? When you leave their presence, are you steadier or subtly off balance? A little rushed, a little indebted, a little unsure of what you agreed to? You do not need a lab to notice these things. You need a pause, a journal, and perhaps one neutral voice outside the bubble who can say, "This pattern is familiar," or, "No, this is not normal." Because the triad is so often associated with spectacle, we imagine it only in villains who make headlines. But you will meet softer versions in everyday life. The boss who tells stirring stories about vision while siphoning credit. The friend who always seems to be in a crisis that requires your resources but never grows from your help. The partner who collects your vulnerabilities like currency and spends them when you resist. You will also meet environments that reward triad traits. Organizations where metrics matter more than humans, communities where dissent is framed as disloyalty, industries that confuse charisma with competence and speed with wisdom. In such places, triad patterns are not merely present. They are promoted. People who hesitate at moral edges are seen as not hungry enough. People who ask inconvenient questions are not a culture fit. People who defend their boundaries are difficult. If you feel punished for being whole, it may not be you. It may be an ecosystem calibrated to a broken meter. History, of course, offers loud examples. It is wiser, though, to speak in careful terms. We cannot diagnose the dead, and we should not reduce complex lives to buzzwords. Still, certain figures are often cited for behaviors that resonate with triad patterns. Tyrants who built cults of personality while arranging purges with poker-faced calm. Con artists who wove charisma and deceit into fortunes built on the savings of others. Court intriguers who played factions like violins, smiling in every direction while pulling one thread at a time. Think of emperors who burned cities to protect a myth of themselves. Confidence men whose charisma bought the time needed to deepen the fraud. Propagandists who learned which stories inflamed the crowd and injected them daily until truth bent like metal in heat. The lesson is not that history is filled with monsters and the present is safe. The lesson is that the patterns are portable. Dress them in any century and they will find work. If you grew up around triad traits, your nervous system may have learned a strange lesson. That instability is normal and attention is earned by performance. You may feel most alive in the presence of a charming storm, most bored in the presence of steady love, most guilty when you say no, most valued when you are useful. This is not a character flaw. It is conditioning. Step by step, you can retrain your expectations of love and leadership. You can learn the taste of calm and let it become your standard. You can practice small, unfancy boundaries until your body stops mistaking them for cruelty. You can notice which compliments come with strings and which come with silence. You can choose the long game, relationships where repair is possible, teams where questioning is safe, projects where metrics serve meaning, not the other way around. One of the challenges in naming triad patterns is that modern culture often rewards their surface. Narcissistic confidence photographs well. Machiavellian strategy looks like executive excellence. Psychopathic calm reads as unflappable under pressure. When the outcomes are praised and the methods are invisible, people forget to ask how the sausage is made. That is why stories matter. Survivors telling the quiet parts out loud, how they were pressured, how they were isolated, how they were made to doubt their senses, restore necessary detail. This is also why accountability matters. When consequences follow harm, the glamour thins. There is nothing as clarifying as consistent, transparent boundaries applied without fear or favor. In healthy systems, charisma is evaluated, not worshipped. Strategy is audited, not excused. Calm is measured by its fruits, not by its tone. How do these traits interact inside one person? Imagine a leader who believes deeply in their own specialness, who plans with cold skill, and who does not feel the usual breaks of guilt. Their path upward is greased by charisma. Their consolidation of power is enabled by shrewd alliance building and information control. Their tolerance for inflicting pain allows them to cut quickly when others would hesitate. If they are also intelligent, they will understand optics. Perform care when cameras are on. Perform strength when dissent rises. Perform humility after a scandal long enough to ride out the storm. If you oppose them alone, you will be painted as jealous, bitter, ungrateful, or unstable. If you oppose them together, with receipts, with steady voices, with persistence, they will lose the only resource they cannot manufacture on their own: other people's belief. Triad power withers in open air. It needs the climate of confusion, isolation, and urgency. It needs the myth of inevitability. It needs good people to feel tired. The temptation, when learning all this, is to become hard. Don't. Hardness keeps danger out, but it also keeps life out. The better move is to become clear. Clarity is soft around the edges and firm at the center. Clarity can listen without swallowing. praise without pledging, help without becoming a host. Clarity asks for time. Clarity insists on process. Clarity is not drawn to the quickest talker in the room, but to the person who keeps their word quietly across months. Clarity chooses leaders who are willing to be held to the standards they set. Clarity chooses lovers who repair when they err. Clarity chooses friends who can be told no without turning the word into a weapon. If you recognize triad patterns in yourself, take a longer breath. Honesty is a better scaffold than shame. Ask where you learned that control is safer than truth, that winning is worth any cost, that feelings are weaknesses to be mined. Ask what it would look like to make smaller promises you can keep, to disclose motives before others have to guess, to feel the friction of guilt and let it slow you down instead of cutting the brakes. Power is not evil. Strategy is not evil. Calm is not evil. What matters is whether these strengths are tethered to empathy and guided by values that survive the audit of daylight. In the absence of those tethers, the triad becomes predation. In their presence, the same capacities can serve: decisive leadership that still listens, ambitious plans that still protect, unflappable composure that still cares. As we near the end, let's make this practical and gentle. Think of one relationship, one workplace, one community where you feel more managed than met. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, what am I being asked to provide: admiration, access, or obedience? And what happens when I stop providing it? Second, how do I feel after interactions? Clearer or foggier? Steadier or rushed? Respected or subtly ashamed? Third, what small boundary could I test this week that is safe but real? Asking for time before a decision, declining a non-essential request, writing down agreements so the story doesn't shift. You do not need to confront a personality profile. You need to reclaim 1 inch of agency at a time. The map will redraw itself as you move. The dark triad is not an omen that doom is unavoidable. It is a language for patterns that have shaped empires and households alike. Knowing the language lets you speak back. It lets you break the spell sooner. It gives you words for the feeling that something is off when, on paper, everything looks fine. It invites you to choose relationships and leaders who do not require your confusion to function. It invites you to become a person who can be strong without spectacle, strategic without secrecy, calm without cruelty. Tonight, as you close this chapter, notice your own center. Notice what kind of admiration you seek and from whom. Notice which strategies you call clever and which you call costly. Notice how you treat the people who cannot repay you. The predators of history are loud and instructive, but the more important work is quiet and present. How you make choices when no one is watching, how you respond to the word no, how you handle power when it is finally placed in your hands. The shadows are real. So is your capacity to move through them with eyes open, heart intact, and a life that does not require anyone else to disappear for you to stand tall. Section 4. Tools of the Mind, the Techniques of Psychological Control. The most dangerous chains are the ones you can't see, because when the mind believes it is free, it will often tighten the knot itself. Let's walk softly into this territory together, not to turn anyone into a magician of control, but to put names to the tricks that already surround us. The goal is not to become suspicious of everyone, but to become faithful to yourself, to your senses, your memory, your boundaries, your slow and patient judgment. Many of the techniques we'll explore are not exotic. They are ordinary human tools, sharpened by repetition and sometimes poisoned by intent. Used with care and consent, some of them can heal and teach. Used in the shadows, they bend perception, compress choice, and rewrite the story you tell yourself about what is happening. When you can name the move, you can breathe again. When you can breathe, you can choose. Begin with gaslighting, the quiet art of distorting reality to control perception. It rarely arrives as a dramatic accusation. It begins as a correction, a chuckle, a confident, "That's not what happened." Repeated just enough times that your first certainty wobbles. Imagine you raise a concern with someone close. You describe an event that hurt you. They do not attack your feelings directly. They move the spotlight to your memory. You're remembering it wrong. You're too sensitive. You always hear things negatively. With enough repetition, the argument is no longer about the event. It's about whether you can trust your own mind. That shift is the heart of gaslighting. The relocation of truth from your senses to someone else's version of events. It's especially powerful when paired with affection and intermittent kindness, because then the manipulator becomes both the source of doubt and the source of relief. Your nervous system learns to outsource certainty. You feel off, you seek their clarity, they provide a story that absolves them and confuses you, and you take the story because the cost of holding your own is loneliness. Gaslighting is not just lying. It is strategic lying aimed at your confidence. You don't escape by winning the debate. You escape by refusing to debate your right to your experience. I hear your view. Mine is different. My memory matters to me. The tactic starves in the presence of recorded facts, neutral witnesses, and your willingness to pause the conversation until your footing returns. Next, guilt-tripping and emotional blackmail, the quiet taxes on your autonomy. These emerge when someone links your goodness to your compliance. After everything I've done for you, I guess I just don't matter. If you loved me, you would. Notice the shape. Your character is put on trial, and the easiest way to prove your innocence is to say yes. This is not the language of mutual care. It's a lever that uses your empathy as the hinge. Blackmail arrives with if-then chains. If you don't do this, I will withdraw, expose, punish, or hurt myself. It may be theatrical or subtle. It may be disguised as vulnerability. But the function is the same. It converts your kindness into a contract you did not sign. Healthy relationships make requests that you can decline without losing safety. Unhealthy ones make requests that you must accept to keep the peace. The gentle antidote is not counterattack. It is distinction. There is a difference between guilt that belongs to you because you have wronged someone and guilt that was handcrafted to move you because you're no threat in someone's control. Ask a simple inner question when guilt floods. Did I do harm, or did I disappoint? If you disappointed, you can be kind without surrendering. I care about how you feel. I still won't do that. Over time, you'll feel the difference in your breathing. Guilt that belongs to you asks for repair. Manufactured guilt demands obedience. Consider the foot-in-the-door technique, a compliance pattern built on momentum. First, a small request, almost too minor to refuse. Sign a petition. Share an email. Take a trial. Help for 5 minutes. You agree because it's easy and because you like seeing yourself as helpful and consistent. Then comes the larger request that was always the point. Your prior yes becomes the logic for your next yes. You feel a tug to stay congruent with the person you just performed. Nothing monstrous has happened. A nudge became a push, became a path. The twin of this technique is door in the face, which starts with a large ask that is likely to be refused, not to secure it, but to make the next ask look reasonable. Could you donate 500? No, understood. How about 50? The contrast does the work. You feel relief and gratitude, even though the second ask was the destination all along. Neither technique is evil by nature. Teachers, therapists, and coaches use graduated steps to help people grow. But when urgency hums and transparency thins, these patterns become subtle nets. If you notice the net, slow the moment down. You are allowed to be inconsistent across different asks when new information or new stakes are present. You are allowed to say, I agreed to that. I'm not agreeing to this. Conditioning and anchoring sit deeper in the soil. Conditioning is the shaping of behavior by associating actions with outcomes, rewards and punishments, schedules and surprises. You already know this in your bones. Touch a hot pan, withdraw faster next time. Tell a story well, feel the warmth of laughter and tell it again. In manipulation, conditioning is calibrated. Compliments arrive right after compliance. Attention dries up after dissent. Invitations appear when you're quiet and vanish when you speak. These are not random moods. They are feedback loops. Over time, they teach you to anticipate the emotional climate and act accordingly. The loop tightens when rewards become intermittent. Unpredictable dopamine bursts that keep you pulling the lever just one more time. Many digital platforms are built on this math. Notifications drip in irregularly, little lights in the dark. Anchoring adds another layer. The first piece of information you receive becomes the frame through which you interpret the rest. The first price you see, the first description you hear, the first opinion presented with confidence. Anchors can be numbers, stories, or labels. They stick because your mind wants a reference point, and once it has one, it adjusts around it rather than starting over. You defend yourself not by distrusting every first impression, but by asking, who set this anchor and why? What would I think if I had seen a different starting point? Good faith influence exposes anchors and invites comparison. Manipulation hides them and insists they are reality. Now, the slippery ground of NLP, neurolinguistic programming, and its darker applications. At its most generous, NLP is a bundle of ideas about how language, physiology, and attention can influence states of mind, how matching someone's posture can build rapport, how specific sensory words can evoke vivid experiences, how reframing can change the meaning of a setback. In therapy and coaching, some of these tools are used openly to help people interrupt unhelpful patterns. But in the shadows, they can be used as shortcuts to trust and compliance. A manipulator may mirror your gestures and cadence to signal unconscious sameness. We are alike. Relax. They may pepper their speech with embedded commands hidden in casual phrases. As you consider this, you can go ahead and feel good about moving forward, hoping that the rhythm of the sentence carries the instruction past your critical mind. They may deliberately anchor a positive state to their presence, cracking the perfect joke at the perfect time, giving the perfect gift at the peak of your need, so that your nervous system tags them as relief. None of this is magic. It's rehearsal and timing. The defense is not paranoia. It is counter-rapport with yourself. Can you notice when you feel unusually seen, unusually hurried, unusually certain, and ask for time before you pledge? Can you break a state by changing the environment? Standing up, drinking water, stepping outside? Your mind is not a passive canvas. You can pick up the brush. Covert hypnosis sounds theatrical, as if pocket watches and spirals were required. In practice, it's often just the strategic use of attention and suggestion. Hypnosis, understood plainly, is focused attention plus heightened suggestibility. We enter light trances all the time, immersed in a movie, lost on a highway, scrolling past midnight. Covert influence tries to nudge you into that focus and then seed instructions. The techniques are not always esoteric. Soothing tonality, rhythmic speech, sensory language that pulls you inward. Notice the way your breath feels as it moves. Imagine how this will look tomorrow morning. And stories nested inside stories so that your analytical mind is busy tracking plot while the emotional message lands. Subliminal influence, the cousin in this family, leans on stimuli below the threshold of conscious detection. Images or cues so brief or faint that you cannot report them, but your nervous system registers them. The scientific evidence for classic subliminal messaging is mixed and often overstated. Yet there is little doubt that repeated subtle cues, color, shape, sound, pacing, can prime associations and tilt mood. The point is not to fear every soundtrack or camera cut. It is to remember that attention is a gateway drug. When you choose where to place it, you reduce the power of what tries to slip in uninvited. It helps to see how these tools braid together in real life. Picture a high-pressure sales call. The rep begins by mirroring your tone, asking soft biographical questions that yield inexpensive intimacy. A joke lands, rapport warms. They ask for a small yes, a quick survey, a free trial while praising your discernment. The anchor drops. A high price presented as industry standard, then a limited-time discount that feels like a win. As you hesitate, they share a story of someone just like you who waited and regretted it. Scarcity and loss aversion hum in the background. You ask for time. They reply with urgency. You request written details. They return to feelings. Trust your gut. You know this is right. If you say no, a sadness shades their voice. Guilt raises its flag. If you say yes, a fast contract arrives on your phone, designed to be signed on a screen that fits only a few lines at a time. None of this is illegal. Each move is a little nudge. But together, the room tilts. Recognizing the pattern gives you a way to flatten the floor. Slow down, widen the frame, move from story to specifics, move from the present heat to future consequences. In a relationship, the choreography may be slower but no less precise. After a boundary, the temperature drops. Texts come later. Affection thins. You wonder if you overreacted. A few days pass. Then a burst of sweetness arrives, framed as proof that everything is fine and also as evidence that your earlier concern was unnecessary. Your body learns the lesson. Conflict equals cold. Compliance equals warmth. Add a little gaslighting, you're imagining patterns, and perhaps a claim of noble intention. I just want us to be happy. And the loop closes. You return to harmony by walking away from yourself. To unlearn, you will need tiny experiments. Hold one boundary and allow the cold to be cold without sprinting to warm it. Name one pattern to a neutral friend. Write one page describing what actually happened, not the story you were sold. Control techniques lose oxygen when you stay with the discomfort long enough to see it clearly. In politics and religion, the same tools scale with microphones and myths. A leader repeats a phrase until it becomes an anchor, a truth that frames all incoming facts. Opponents are caricatured. Identity is fused with loyalty. Emotional blackmail appears as moral black and white. If you question, you are a traitor. If you doubt, you are corrupt. If you leave, you are lost. Gaslighting emerges as revisionist history. What you saw was not what you saw. What you heard was not what you heard. Ritual and rhythm create trance-like states where suggestion is easier to plant, the chant, the song, the call and response. Again, none of these ingredients are inherently dark. Ritual can heal. Shared language can unite. Music can uplift. The difference is whether the techniques are used to increase your freedom to think or to reduce it, whether dissent is welcomed as part of a living tradition or punished as a threat to the brand. Because these tools are powerful, it's tempting to swing to the other extreme and treat all influence as violence. That would be a mistake. You cannot live without influence. Mentors influence. Friends influence. Stories influence. The ethical line is consent and care. Are the methods visible enough that you can meaningfully agree? Are you allowed to slow down, to ask for details, to bring in a third opinion, to say no without being shamed or exiled? Are the tools used to help you act in line with your own values, or to replace them with someone else's? Power plus transparency can be a gift. Power plus secrecy often becomes a trap. So what do you do when you feel the trap begin to close? You practice micro-moves that restore choice. You ask for time and space. I'll decide tomorrow. You shift the channel. From emotion to facts, from stories to numbers, from rhetoric to receipts. You make reality external. Notes, timelines, screenshots, a second pair of eyes. You return to your body. Shoulders down, breath longer, feet on the floor. You borrow language that does not inflame. I'm not convinced yet. That doesn't work for me. I need to think. You separate love from compliance. I care about you, and my answer is no. You refuse to negotiate your worth. My goodness isn't up for debate. None of this requires aggression. It requires practice and the willingness to tolerate the silence that follows a boundary. If you recognize yourself as someone who has used these tools in the dark, take a slow breath and bring light instead of shame. Many learned manipulation as survival, pleasing to avoid punishment, managing to get attention, framing to stay safe. You can bring the same intelligence into the open. Tell people what you want without pressure. Ask for consent before you influence deeply. Replace urgency with clarity. Own your anchors. Welcome no. You will lose the rush that comes from steering another person's will, and you will gain the steadier satisfaction of being chosen without a trick. And if you recognize someone in your life who seems fluent in these methods, don't panic. You don't need to label them or fix them. You need to protect your attention, your time, your story. The person who respects your pace respects your person. The room where you can ask naive questions without being humiliated is the room where truth can live. The community that can laugh at itself, correct itself, and make amends without theatrics is the community that will not rely on fog to function. These are simple tests. They are also profound. As we close, put a hand on the part of you that still wants to be good and gentle and generous. You do not have to become cold to be safe. You do not have to become hard to be strong. You can remain soft and keep your spine. The world will keep offering tools. Some will be honest and healing. Some will be honest and sharp. Some will be smiling and hidden. Your work is not to fear the toolbox. It is to choose what belongs in your hands and to recognize when someone else is trying to use them on you without your consent. The mind is not a fortress to be sealed. It is a home to be tended, with windows that open and doors that lock and a welcome mat that says, in polite letters, "Come in with truth." Tonight, think of one conversation that left you a little foggy. What technique might have been at play? Gaslighting, guilt, anchoring, a quick compliance dance, a mirrored smile that shrank your questions? You don't need to confront anyone. Just write what happened, what you felt, what you wanted to say but didn't. Then choose one small experiment for the week ahead. Ask for time. Ask for detail. Ask for quiet. Ask for a pause. The tools of the mind will always exist. The difference now is that you can see them, and seeing is the beginning of freedom. Section 5. Emotional exploitation. How feelings become weaknesses. The same feelings that make us beautifully human, love, fear, trust, can be tuned like strings by anyone who learns your music. That is the paradox of the heart. What opens us to connection also opens us to control. Let's step into this gently, the way a friend would open a difficult conversation at a quiet table. Emotional exploitation rarely looks like a villain on a stage. It looks like warmth that arrives when you behave, silence that settles when you dissent, promises that bloom when you're hopeful, and pressure that tightens when you're unsure. At the center is a simple blueprint. If I can touch what you love, amplify what you fear, and borrow your trust, I can steer your choices without ever raising my voice. This is not melodrama. It is how the human nervous system works. We bond first, we reason second, and between the two sits a set of ancient levers that most of us never learn to name. Love is the most powerful lever because it builds a home inside you. When you love someone or something, a partner, a family, a team, a cause, you open a doorway. In healthy relationships, that doorway invites reciprocity. In exploitative ones, it becomes a toll gate. You will feel the price in subtle ways. You'll notice that affection seems to arrive on a schedule you don't control. When you're compliant, the room is warm. When you resist, winter returns. It does not feel like punishment at first. It feels like weather. You find yourself dressing for seasons you didn't cause. Over time, your body learns that survival means harmony, and harmony means shrinking. You learn to pre-apologize so conflict never lands. You turn down your own volume so their comfort never dips. You become a thermostat set to someone else's temperature, regulating the climate of a relationship with your own silence. None of this happens because you are weak. It happens because your nervous system wants to keep the village intact. Belonging is not a luxury for us. It is an ancient safety signal. Exploiters know this and build their structures around it. Fear is the second lever, and it does not need to be loud to be effective. Loud fear, the kind that shouts and threatens, creates resistance. Quiet fear, the fear of losing connection, status, meaning, or stability, creates obedience. Quiet fear whispers that you will be alone if you tell the truth, that you will be exposed if you say no, that you will be seen as ungrateful if you decline, that you will be punished by fate if you leave the system that currently feeds you. It trades in the currency of what if. What if you never find love like this again? What if no team wants you? What if the outside world is colder than this room, even with its drafts and shadows? Under fear, imagination becomes a projector that screens worst-case futures, and you edit your present to avoid them. It is not logic. It is survival math. Your body calculates risk and chooses the least threatening path it can see. Manipulators dim the lights around the other exits so the path they want feels like the only one left. Trust is the hinge that makes the door swing. You build trust through consistent care, shared truth, and small promises kept over time. Exploiters build a different kind of trust. They manufacture it fast. They will mirror your language, echo your values, and reveal just enough vulnerability to unlock yours. You'll feel unusually seen early on, not because they have done the slow work of learning you, but because they have practiced the quick work of reading you. Trust that grows fast can be real, but it is fragile. Trust that grows slow is resilient. The exploited rarely lack intelligence. They lack time. Rushed trust skips the steps that would have revealed the pattern. By the time inconsistencies appear, you have already invested identity. I'm the kind of person who believes in this relationship, this cause, this leader, this company. An identity defends itself. Dependency is the quiet architecture that follows. We become dependent on what meets our needs, attention, security, meaning, belonging, and the manipulator learns to arrange those needs so they flow mainly through them. You will be invited to rely on their feedback to define reality. You will be encouraged to center your days around their schedule, your goals around their goals, your feelings around their reactions. Feels like fusion in the beginning. It feels like erosion later. The edges of your separate self washed over by a tide that calls itself love or loyalty or faith. Attachment psychology explains some of this. If your early maps taught you that love is conditional or chaotic, you may twist yourself toward any pattern that hints at steadiness, even if that steadiness is costly. On the other hand, if you learned that you must earn care by caretaking, you will find yourself working in someone else's emotional garden until your own withers. Exploiters do not need to chain you. They just need to install a belief that your oxygen comes through their mask. Empathy, the capacity to feel with others, should be our safest bridge. In the hands of an exploiter, it becomes a fishing line. They will display vulnerability strategically to hook your care, often releasing it at precise moments. After a conflict where you were about to assert a boundary, after a request you hesitated to accept, after a long silence that made you ready to repair. Tears that arrive on schedule are not always performances. People do cry when stakes are high, but when every pushback is met by a story that asks you to stand down because they're going through so much, your empathy becomes a tool you don't know you're holding. Healthy vulnerability reveals truth so connection can deepen. Exploitative vulnerability reveals pain so leverage can increase. The difference is not in the tears. It is in what follows. Do patterns change once care is given? Or do patterns reset until the next convenient moment requires another display? Emotional exploitation thrives on cycles, not moments. There is the cycle of abuse and reward, sometimes called intermittent reinforcement. It begins with a rupture, criticism, withdrawal, betrayal, a sharp word that lingers, and follows with a repair that is bigger than the harm. The apology arrives wrapped in romance, gifts, grand gestures, or spiritual language. The nervous system, flooded by relief, tags the relationship as a place of intense feeling and deep meaning. The mind rationalizes, we fight because we're passionate. No one loves like this. The highs make the lows worth it. Over time, your baseline shifts. You start to believe that tenderness must be purchased with pain, that attention must be earned by endurance, that rewards mean more after punishment. Exploiters do not always do this consciously. Some are repeating what was modeled for them. But intent does not erase impact. The cycle binds because the rewards are unpredictable, and unpredictability is addictive. When you never know which version of someone you will meet, you keep returning to the door hoping for the one you love. Let's ground this in scenes, not theories. In a toxic relationship, the morning may begin with warmth so saturated you forget last night's indifference. Your body can feel whiplash and call it intimacy. You bring up the discrepancy gently. A quick fog of confusion descends. You're reading too much into things. You're always negative. You're ruining a good day. You retreat from your own senses to preserve the peace. Later, when you're alone, the memory of the fog feels heavier than the original hurt. This is the tax you pay for raising the price of clarity. After a while, you will lower the price. You will let details blur so the home can stay intact. That is the shape of exploitation. Self-abandonment packaged as harmony. In a cult, the architecture is more formal but the levers are the same. Love floods at the door, instant family, instant purpose, a name for your ache. Trust is handed to you as doctrine. You don't have to build it, you just have to recite it. Fear is externalized, outsiders are lost, critics are enemies, doubt is a disease. Dependency grows as your ties to previous communities thin. The leader's approval becomes sacred because it delivers belonging. When your questions mature, they are treated like rebellion. You are given a choice that is not a choice, loyalty or exile. The heartbreak of leaving is part of the trap. You must grieve the home even as you recognize the harm. People ask, why didn't they just walk away? They did, in pieces over months or years. Bodies can leave a building in an hour. Nervous systems need seasons. Corporate manipulation is often described in softer language, culture fit, mission, family, but the mechanics are familiar. Love arrives as praise and perks, a branded belonging. Fear hums in deadlines and metrics that never quite stabilize. Trust is created through slogans that double as expectations. We hustle hard. We're changing the world. We do what it takes. None of these are inherently wrong. Meaning matters. But watch how they operate when you set a boundary. Ask to go home on time for a month, and see whether you are framed as lacking commitment. Decline a weekend sprint and measure how your standing shifts. Suggest a slower timeline and observe whether your competence is questioned. In some places, exploitation hides inside excellence. The story is that greatness requires sacrifice. The unspoken clause is that the sacrifice is always yours. Over time, you learn to convert fatigue into pride. You will say, "I'm fine," because everyone you respect is also fine. The loop tightens when compensation, money, status, access arrives on the other side of compliance. You will rationalize that it is fair because you chose it. And you did choose it, but choice made under ambient coercion is not the same as choice made in daylight. How do people get in? Through doors that make sense. A lonely person wants belonging. A capable person wants leadership that sees them. A generous person wants to give. A believer wants a mission worthy of devotion. Exploiters don't invent these desires. They aim them. That is why shame is such a poor teacher here. Shame says, "You should have known." Compassion says, "Of course you wanted that." The question is whether you were allowed to want it without having to abandon yourself. Compassion opens the way out because it offers a self you can return to. Shame traps because it tells you that you are the problem, and then you will cling to the very system that created the harm in order to prove you are worthy after all. Breaking the emotional loop begins with the smallest possible act of self-trust. Not confrontation, not shouting, not sudden exits. Those may come, but they are not step one. Step one is noticing in real time when your body compresses. Your breath shortens, your shoulders lift, your stomach tightens, your vision narrows. That is your interior meteorologist announcing a storm. You do not need to argue the weather. You need to get under a shelter. "I need a moment. I'll answer tomorrow. I want to check my notes." Shelter is the pause that the cycle cannot tolerate. Exploiters depend on momentum. They depend on the hot cognition of the moment. When you cool the moment, meaning returns to you. Your memory unblurs. Your values speak. Your fear shrinks to a scale you can hold. Next comes externalizing reality. Write down what was said before the fog, not after. Ask a neutral person to reflect what they heard. Schedule difficult conversations for times when you are rested and nourished, not at midnight after a long day when your boundaries are thin. Keep agreements outside your head, emails, shared docs, text confirmations, so the story cannot shapeshift. This is not about catching someone. It is about keeping your own footing when the floor moves. If the person is acting in good faith, they will welcome clarity. If they are exploiting you, clarity will feel like a threat because it ruins the economy of confusion. Reclaiming choice requires tolerating loss. You will lose some warmth when you say no. You will lose the image of yourself as endlessly accommodating. You may lose a circle that only loved you in the shape of usefulness. On the other side, you will gain something less dramatic but more durable. A daily life where your nervous system does not live on a roller coaster. This is not a small gain. Consistency may feel boring at first if you were trained to equate intensity with love. Stay anyway. Let boredom become safety. Let safety become clarity. Let clarity choose, not the echo inside you that still chases the old pattern. If you are listening and realizing you have used some of these tactics, do not hide from that realization. Facing it is how the pattern ends. Ask this: where did I learn that love must be managed, that honesty must be edited, that fear is a reasonable tool to get what I need? Ask one person you trust to tell you when you slide into pressure, and teach your body to survive the discomfort of hearing no. Replace grand apologies with small, consistent changes. If you are a leader, replace slogans with structures, clear workloads, reviewable decisions, realistic timelines. If you are a partner, replace promises with practices, scheduled check-ins, repair without drama, boundaries you keep even when it's inconvenient. Love without control is slower and quieter, but its roots hold. If you are in the heat of exploitation, know this: there is no perfect exit. There is only the next honest step. It might be a journal page you keep safe. It might be 3 days without responding to late-night messages. It might be one meeting with a counselor to map a plan. It might be a conversation with a friend you have not been allowed to see. It might be a script you write for yourself so your voice doesn't abandon you when the moment shakes. I am not debating my memory. My answer is no today. I will decide when I am calm. These are simple lines, but they are bridges back to yourself. Now imagine the world you are moving toward. In that world, love is not a toll road. Fear is information, not a whip. Trust is slow and earns its weight. Leaders are human and correctable. Work is meaningful, not consuming. Faith invites questions because truth survives inquiry. Families are places where a no does not threaten a home. None of that is utopian. It is human when incentives are aligned with care. You may not control every system you're part of, but you can design your corner. You can choose friends who celebrate your boundaries, partners who repair without punishment, communities that prize transparency more than image. You can become the kind of person who does not need to dim someone else's light to see your own path. As we close, take a slow breath and remember a moment. Not dramatic, just honest. When you felt yourself abandon a small truth to keep a big feeling safe. Maybe you laughed at a joke that stung. Maybe you said yes to a favor that felt like a test. Maybe you stayed quiet when a story you knew was false was told as gospel. Those moments are the seeds of loops. They are also the seeds of change. Choose one small place this week to keep a small truth. Not a war, a truth. Say, that didn't feel good. Say, I need time. Say, I disagree, but I'm here. Watch what happens. Some doors will close. Better ones will open, even if slowly. The heart that lets itself be used becomes hard. The heart that learns to choose becomes strong. The difference is not volume. It is direction. Let your love point toward people and places that don't charge you to be whole. Let your fear speak softly and briefly, then step aside. Let your trust take its time. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of a life you don't have to leave yourself to keep. Section 6. The Science of Persuasion and Suggestion. The most convincing cage is the one that feels like a doorway you chose. Persuasion becomes control the moment your freedom is carefully guided toward one acceptable outcome, and you leave smiling. Let's walk into this with quiet eyes and an honest pulse. Persuasion, at its best, is the art of helping two minds meet in the light. It clarifies options, aligns interests, and honors consent. But the same levers that move us toward understanding can be tuned to move us toward surrender. When pressure rises, when time tightens, when identity stands on the line, suggestion slips past the guards. We don't notice a push if it arrives disguised as a promise. We don't resist a script if the lines sound like our own thoughts. The science here is simple, elegant, and ancient, and in the wrong hands it becomes a velvet rope around the neck. Begin with the familiar pillars of persuasion: reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking and scarcity, and tilt them under a darker light. Reciprocity is the social glue that says, I gave to you, you can give to me. In healthy communities, it's generosity returning home. In manipulation, reciprocity becomes a debt you never agreed to shoulder. A free trial that requires your card. A gift that arrives precisely before the ask. A favor that feels like warmth until you're reminded of it at the worst possible moment. You think you're paying kindness back. You're actually paying access forward. Commitment and consistency pull next. We want to be the people we say we are. We want our actions to rhyme. A small public pledge, share this sign that wear this badge, can be noble. Or it can be a wedge that opens you to larger asks, each justified by the last. You told the world you're the kind of person who supports the cause. Now prove it with time, with money, with silence when the cause behaves badly. The dark twist is simple. The commitment is framed as a test of character rather than a choice. Saying no doesn't mean you're declining an action. It means you're betraying yourself. That is not a sales pitch. It's identity theft. Social proof is how we keep from drowning in a sea of options. We look to the group, to the reviews, to the line outside the door. If many people choose this, it must be safe. Often that's true. But crowds can be engineered. Numbers can be staged. Applause can be rented. The loudest opinion in the room can be the one most rehearsed. In a dark frame, social proof doesn't show you reality. It replaces it. The message is not people like this. The message is people like you like this. And suddenly your tribe is on the hook. You're not deciding, you're belonging. Authority is a necessary shortcut. We trust doctors, teachers, engineers, elders, leaders, people who have earned knowledge and responsibility. But a lab coat can be purchased. A title can be inflated. A platform can be built on charisma rather than competence. Authority in its shadow form says, "Believe me because of where I stand, not because of what I'm saying." It discourages questions by framing them as disrespect. It turns credentials into shields and confidence into proof. The real test of authority is not how loudly it speaks. It's how well it answers when you ask a simple why. Liking is the warmest lever. We say yes to those we enjoy, admire, or find familiar. Shared hometowns, shared music, shared jokes, these open doors. In the light, this is how friendship starts. In the dark, liking is manufactured. The room is mirrored to reflect you back at yourself. Your language is echoed, your values are praised, your enemies are booed with you. The person across from you feels like home, but they studied the blueprints. The danger isn't liking. It's relaxing your standards because liking arrived early and brightly. Scarcity is the whip. When something feels rare, it becomes radiant. Time limited. Seats limited. Stock limited. Love limited. Scarcity can be real. It can also be theatrical. The darker move isn't "this offer ends Friday." It's "this offer ends when your identity is proven." You have to move now to show who you are. A visionary, a team player, a believer, a good partner, a loyal friend. Scarcity compresses time. Compressed time compresses thinking. And compressed thinking signs things it wouldn't sign in daylight. Persuasion becomes suggestion when framing and reframing take the steering wheel. Framing is the angle of the camera. It decides what you see first and what you don't see at all. The same facts can feel like crisis or opportunity depending on the frame. A product is a solution. Your current life is a problem. A policy is freedom. Its absence is chaos. A person is a savior. Their critics are jealous. Reframing is the magician's second flourish. You raise a problem. I redraw its edges until only one exit remains. I don't lie. I reorganize. I don't force. I pre-choose. The trick works best when it borrows your language, the future you, the family you want, the mission you care about. You're not agreeing with me. You're agreeing with an upgraded version of yourself that only I, apparently, can help you become. Then there is the illusion of choice, the cleanest trick in the room. Do you want the red plan or the blue plan? The monthly subscription or the annual discount? The slightly overpriced package or the outrageously overpriced one that makes the middle seem fair? Either way, you stay in the store. Either way, the premise goes unchallenged. That this store is where the real decision lives. Controlled freedom presents a set of options that all serve the same interest while preserving your sense of agency. In personal relationships, it looks like, choose the restaurant. When the more honest question is, do I want to go out at all tonight? In politics, it looks like two extreme bills framed as the only viable paths while the middle ground, slow, messy, boring, is dismissed as weakness. In corporate life, it looks like, which of these aggressive deadlines works best for you? Rather than, is this deadline humane? The question shapes the answer. The fence shapes the field. Media and advertising refine these levers at industrial scale. Attention is harvested. Language is be-tested. Images are optimized to trigger familiar emotions. Nostalgia, outrage, aspiration, fear of missing out. The feed is not a neutral river. It is a highly managed canal that learns your rhythms, your micro-moments, Your 2 a.m. worries. The ad doesn't just know your age. It knows your restlessness. It doesn't just know your location. It knows your local loneliness. This is not a conspiracy. It's a business model. The promise is personalization. The risk is enclosure. A world that fits you perfectly can become a world that never challenges you honestly. You don't need censorship if you can build a menu that never shows certain meals. Mass manipulation follows the same rules with bigger speakers. Propaganda takes the bones of persuasion and wraps them in myth. It names a threat, draws a circle around us, reduces complex problems to a clean villain, and repeats a few crisp phrases until they feel ancestral. The repetition is not laziness. It's neuroscience. Familiarity is mistaken for truth when we're tired, afraid, or busy. The images chosen are never neutral. Angles, colors, symbols, the choreography of a crowd, the rhythm of drums or chants. The goal isn't to inform. It's to perform reality so convincingly that questioning feels like betrayal. The line between morale boosting and truth bending is thin in war and thinner in culture wars. The test is simple but hard to pass. Can the story survive facts that make it less flattering? Can the leader remain leader if the cheer stops for a moment and the audit begins? Real-life case studies are not museum pieces. They're patterns you've already seen. Consider the campaign that sells certainty first and policy second. The rally isn't a town hall. It's a liturgy. Call and response. Slogans chanted until the body warms. Opponents reduced to nicknames that flatten nuance. Social proof is in the crowd. Authority is in the stage height. Scarcity is in the line. This is our last chance. The illusion of choice is in the framing. You're with us or against us. You walk away energized, bonded, less curious. Questioning in that state feels like sin. Consider the launch that turns a phone into a feeling. The lighting is cathedral clean. The presenter speaks like a friendly professor. The video shows hands and skies and smiles more than specs. Scarcity whispers through pre-orders. Authority glows in the logo. Social proof is tomorrow's line outside the store. You're not just buying a device, you're buying a self-portrait. There's nothing dirty about beauty and story. But when the product can't withstand slower questions about repairability, privacy, labor, story becomes smoke. Consider the mentorship that drifts into control. It starts with reciprocity, doors opened, opportunities offered. A public compliment anchors trust. Then comes commitment. Show everyone who you are. Say yes when it's hard. The choices given are framed within loyalty. Join this project or stay average. Scarcity seasons the air. You won't get chances like this again. Authority asks for speed. Liking covers the speed in warmth. If you slow the moment down, you sense the leash. If you keep it fast, you'll call it growth and wonder why you're exhausted. Persuasion crosses the line into control when three things happen. Alternatives are hidden or mocked. Time is compressed beyond reason, and your identity is put on the negotiating table. You can feel it in your body. Your breath shortens. Your vision narrows. Your vocabulary shrinks to have to, must, only. The antidote isn't cleverness. It's pace. Control needs heat. Truth needs air. When you slow a conversation respectfully, tomorrow, in writing, with a second opinion, the spells weaken. The frame widens. The illusion of choice starts to look like a hallway with more doors. The same science can heal. Reciprocity can be turned honest. Give without ledgering, receive without debt. Commitment can be anchored to values rather than to brands. Pledge to fairness, not to factions. Social proof can be broadened. Listen to different rooms, not just the loudest one you like. Authority can be accountable, credentials plus transparency. Liking can mature. Admire people without outsourcing your judgment. Scarcity can be checked. If it's really rare, it will still be rare after you sleep on it. Framing can be shared. Here's how I'm seeing it. How do you see it? The illusion of choice can be dissolved by curiosity. What options are missing? Who benefits from the menu? Media can be used like food, less processed, more whole, better portions, shared at a table where disagreement isn't an eviction notice. None of this requires paranoia. It requires intention. There's a quieter layer to suggestion we haven't named out loud. The stories we tell ourselves. We are our own persuaders every hour. We sell ourselves on staying small because it's safe. We sell ourselves on being indispensable because belonging feels fragile. We frame our past as fate and call it personality. We create false choices: be kind or be strong, be loyal or be honest, be ambitious or be good, when the truth asks for both. The mind is a generous storyteller. It wants simplicity, coherence, a clean hero arc. But a life you can live is Messier and Kinder. When you notice your inner propaganda, absolute statements, catastrophizing headlines, edits that remove your agency, you can become your own fact-checker. Is that really the only choice? Who taught me that? What happens if I add 10 minutes and one friend to this decision? Suggestion loses power when your inner newsroom stops chasing clicks and starts chasing truth. If you have used these levers on others, and most of us have, even unintentionally, walk back toward the light. Say what you want plainly. Offer reasons. Name your frames. Welcome no. When you have access to a microphone, parent, teacher, manager, leader, build processes that make it easy to slow down, to ask questions without punishment, to change course without humiliation. The older I get, the more I believe that good persuasion is not about winning. It's about helping someone decide in a way they can respect tomorrow morning. If you are listening and realizing a particular voice, platform, partner, or system has been steering you, don't go hunting for villains as your first act. Go looking for air. Take one decision off the stove and put it in the oven, low heat, longer time. Change the room where you think, less noise, more paper. Ask a boring friend for their view. Boredom is often the other word for balance. Compare the story to the receipts. And then ask yourself the most liberating question in the toolkit. If I were already enough, what would I choose? Persuasion that requires your inadequacy to function is not persuasion. It's capture. We end where we began, on the edge between influence and control. The science won't change. We will. Authority will still wear suits and robes. Scarcity will still tick like a clock. Social proof will still roar. Frames will still glow. Choices will still come pre-wrapped. Media will still learn your heartbeat. Propaganda will still practice its hymns. But you can move through the noise with a wider gaze and a slower hand. You can treat your attention like breath, yours to give, yours to recover. You can let yourself be persuaded by arguments that survive time, transparency, and the audit of your values. And you can refuse, gently, calmly, consistently, the kind of suggestion that makes you smaller to make someone else's story bigger. Section 7. The Evolution of Dark Psychology in the Digital Age. The oldest tricks in the world did not disappear when we put screens in our hands. They learned to speak in pixels. The more connected we became, the easier it became to tug the strings we didn't know we had. Let's walk through this carefully, like slipping into a loud room and finding a quiet corner where we can still hear ourselves think. The digital age did not invent manipulation. Our ancestors bartered in stories, signals, and status long before the first line of code, but it did industrialize it. What used to require proximity, charisma, and time now scales at the speed of light with a distribution list of billions. The techniques are familiar: attention capture, emotional triggers, social proof, scarcity, authority. What's different is the amplifier. A human nervous system that evolved for slow villages now lives on a carnival midway that never closes, with lights and sounds calibrated to the thresholds of our reward pathways. If you've ever wondered why it's so hard to put the phone down even when you're not enjoying it, the answer is not a lack of willpower. It's design. The rise of social media manipulation begins in a place that feels harmless. Posts, likes, shares. These are not just interactions. They are cues. Every tiny signal you give becomes a breadcrumb for systems designed to predict what will keep you on the platform. That prediction, in turn, becomes prescription. The feed you see is not the world. It is a mirror carefully tilted to show you the angles that hold your gaze. Anger holds it. Outrage holds it. Beautiful faces, high-status scenes, controversy wrapped in certainty. These hold it too. If you feel more extreme online than you do in your daily life, it's not an accident. It's a product. The content that survives in the attention economy is not what is truest, but what is most clickable. And clickability follows a rough rule. The more your emotion spikes, the less your reflection speaks. That gap is where manipulation walks in. An algorithm is not a villain in a cape. It's a math teacher that learned your habits and now tutors you relentlessly. But when tutoring turns into shepherding, and shepherding turns into fencing, the invisible hand becomes a leash. You don't need to be shown lies to be moved. You only need to be shown some truths more than others, at just the right time, in just the right mood. The result is curation that feels like discovery and persuasion that feels like preference. Think of the way a recommendation system can walk you from a harmless curiosity to a heated conviction in 10 short steps, each one logical, none of them chosen by you in the full sense of choice. We call these rabbit holes, but they are more like sluices, channels that tilt attention from the gentle middle toward the charged edges where engagement is hot. When a feed knows your rhythms, when you doom scroll late at night, what topics pull you from chores, whose faces flood you with longing, it knows how to stage manage your day. The technical phrase is personalization. The human experience is, I was just checking one thing and now an hour is gone. We often blame ourselves for this drift, but it helps to recognize the architecture. Intermittent rewards, a like that arrives when you are about to put the phone down, a message that pings just as your focus returns to work. Train behavior faster than predictable ones. And while the algorithm does not have intention in the moral sense, it does serve the intentions it was built to optimize: time on site, return rate, ad exposure, conversion. When those metrics are misaligned with your well-being, you feel it in your chest as a low-grade anxiety that doesn't quite resolve. Your attention was harvested, and attention is the gateway to belief. Inside this environment, parasocial relationships bloom like neon flowers. Parasocial doesn't mean fake. It means one-sided. You know an influencer's voice, laugh, morning routine, childhood story, the exact shade of their favorite mug. They don't know your name. This asymmetry is not a flaw of the medium. It's the business model. Intimacy is simulated at scale through confessional videos, vulnerable captions, casual live streams from messy kitchens. The viewer's brain, wired to bond with faces and stories, fills in the missing pieces and offers trust. Trust becomes loyalty. Loyalty becomes purchasing power and ideological fuel. There is nothing inherently dark about admiring someone online. But notice how dependency arrives. You reach for their voice to regulate your mood. You assign them the role of mentor, friend, therapist, pastor. You begin to borrow their opinions before you form your own. If they ask for something: money for a cause, allegiance in a feud, forgiveness for a misstep, you feel a pull that exceeds what the facts would command. This is the new intimacy economy. Connection as content, care as conversion, access as leverage. The same dynamic plays in microcosm for smaller creators and private communities. The scale changes, the human wiring does not. The psychology of online dating manipulation lives at the same crossroads. High emotion meets engineered choice. Dating apps are markets where people are both shoppers and goods, with interfaces designed to keep you swiping. The profiles perform. The chat windows promise. The dopamine drip hums. Within this space, age-old tactics get new uniforms. Love bombing, overwhelming affection and attention early on, becomes easier when you can maintain parallel conversations, paste perfected lines, and conjure a curated life in photographs. Catfishing, presenting a false identity, scales with stolen images and AI-polished language. Financial grooming shows up as empathy that slowly pivots to crisis. A visa stuck in processing, a sudden medical bill, a business opportunity that needs quick capital. There are schemes with names, romance scams, pig butchering, sextortion, but they all rhyme. They start with intimacy, move to urgency, and end in extraction. People who fall prey are not fools. They are human beings whose longing met a professional. The defense is not hardening your heart. It is slowing your pace, moving conversations into environments with friction, and testing words against reality. Video calls, meetups in public, facts that can be checked with ease. None of this would feel so overwhelming if it weren't also happening in bulk, behind the veil of just business. Advertising learned psychology long ago. What changed is precision. Microtargeting allows messages to be tuned to your age, location, income, habits, and even your current mood inferred by your recent activity. One person's feed says a product will save money. Another says it saves time. A third says it saves the planet. All three claims may be partly true, but the chosen truth is tailored to the lever that moves you. Political campaigns copy the playbook and add heat. Social proof, everyone like you thinks X, combines with scarcity. Time is running out, and authority, trusted voices say, to create a tide you can surf without noticing the undertow. When that tide is directed toward outrage, you begin to visit the feed not for joy but for a daily fix of anger that feels like moral clarity. Anger is not immoral. It's a signal. But anger without reflection is a leash. And a population on leashes is easy to march. Framing and reframing are the painter's tricks of the digital age. A frame sets the question before you even know you've entered the gallery. Is this a story about crime or inequality? Is this a platform problem or a people problem? Is this a glitch or a pattern? Whoever frames the narrative first often wins because humans rarely start from scratch. We adjust from where we're placed. Reframing, in skilled hands, can be a gift that opens options. In darker hands, it becomes spin, a way to shrink choices to the one already chosen for you. Think of how often you're presented with two extremes as if they are the only paths, the illusion of choice, also called controlled freedom. Sign here or lose your chance. Agree or prove you're the enemy. Post now or show you don't care. Real life has more doors, but the interface hides them. Digital dark patterns, confirm shaming, pre-checked boxes, labyrinthine cancellation flows, add friction to freedom while smoothing the road to compliance. Again, none of this means you're weak. It means the menu was written by a chef who profits when you don't ask for substitutions. If it ended there, we could call it bad etiquette. But media and propaganda raised the stakes from personal to planetary. Narrative used to be limited by broadcast scarcity. A few channels, a morning paper, a nightly news anchor. Now anyone can be a channel, and coordinated campaigns can turn a handful of accounts into a chorus. Bots amplify messages. Sock puppet accounts simulate consensus. Targeted memes carry complex claims inside humor that lowers your guard. Psychological warfare in the modern sense is not only about soldiers in conflict zones. It's about attention theaters where factions battle to define reality in every scrolling thumb. When everything is breaking news, nothing is. When every correction is framed as censorship, trust eats itself. What remains is exhaustion, and exhausted people do not fact-check. They click. AI-driven persuasion sits on this landscape like a new weather system. On the bright side, AI can help summarize, translate, filter noise, and surface what you genuinely value. On the dark side, it can generate infinite plausible language and imagery tuned to your profile, test thousands of variations in minutes, and carry on personalized conversations that feel uncanny in their warmth. You will not always know whether the presence building rapport with you is a person with assistance, or no person at all. That uncertainty is fertile ground for manipulation. At the frontier, we see hyper-personalized advertising, AI-crafted political messaging, and simulated influencers that never sleep, never scandal, and never age. We also see recommendation engines that adjust in real time to fleeting emotions. Are you lonely, tired, elated, fragile? The feed can feel your pulse through your behavior and serve what matches. Ethics becomes the question that will not leave the room. What should be optimized, and who decides? If the answer is always engagement, consent becomes a formality. If the answer shifts to well-being, we have to define it and measure it in ways that resist gaming. That is not impossible, but it is work, and it requires voices beyond engineers, psychologists, educators, artists, citizens, because what's at stake is not just code but culture. You might ask, so what do I do? Log off. Sometimes, yes, but abstinence is not a scalable plan for a connected species. The more realistic path is literacy, psychological literacy, media literacy, design literacy, and habits that keep a human pace inside machine time. Notice when your feed makes you feel urgent, superior, or hopeless. Those are signals of a hook, not proof of truth. Slow your scroll with rituals. Read before commenting, click through before sharing, Ask yourself whether the post asks you to think or only to react. Curate your inputs, accounts that repair instead of inflame, creators who disclose incentives, communities that correct themselves in public. Diversify your diet, voices outside your bubble, long-form pieces that make you hold complexity, quiet content that makes nothing go viral in your brain except calm. Use tools that put friction back where dark design removed it, batch notifications, grayscale modes, time-bound sessions. These are not grand gestures. They are small refusals that accumulate into freedom. There is also the work of making parasocial healthier. It helps to name it, I don't know this person. I know their performance. I can enjoy it without outsourcing my judgment. Choose influencers who set boundaries with their audiences, who don't weaponize their followers against critics, who share process more than perfection, who apologize with actions, not tearful monologues and discount codes. If you are a creator, you can practice the ethics of scale. Be clear about sponsorships, resist crisis farming, avoid positioning your community as your sole emotional support. If you are in online dating spaces, design your own speed bumps. Voice before video, video before meetup, public meeting before private space, no financial entanglements with people whose last names you cannot confirm. Each step is less romantic than a whirlwind, but romance that survives daylight is the kind that holds. On the propaganda front, keep simple questions handy when you encounter heated claims. What is being asked of me? Attention, money, outrage, allegiance. What fear is being amplified? What alternative frames are possible? What would this look like if told by someone outside the conflict? Can I find one credible source that complicates this in a way that doesn't flatter my side? You are not required to live in a courtroom, meticulously weighing every post. But a few well-placed questions return you to yourself before you become someone else's multiplier. Remember that your share button is a printing press. Use it like a tool, not a twitch. As for algorithms, we will need rules and better incentives. But even before regulation arrives, there is value in practicing counter-design. Put your values in your path the way platforms put their prompts in yours. If depth matters to you, set an hour a day where you read long-form and turn off everything that blinks. If kindness matters, schedule outreach that isn't performative. A call, a note, a visit. If rest matters, put your phone to bed in a different room and let your nervous system learn night again. The point is not puritanism, it's sovereignty. Most of us are not trying to escape the digital world. We're trying to stop living as if we owe it our attention every second we're awake. The new frontier is not Mars or the metaverse. It's the space between stimulus and response. That is the battlefield where digital dark psychology wins or loses, inside the pause where you could click or breathe, like or wait, rage or ask. That pause is a small country you can rule. When you defend it, feeds become suggestions, not commands. Influencers become artists, not authorities. Ads become offers, not orders. AI becomes a tool, not a puppeteer. Your life becomes legible again as something you are shaping, not something being shaped around you while you scroll. Let me leave you with an image that might help. Imagine your attention as a river. Platforms will always want to build dams and turbines to generate power from your flow. Some will do it openly and share the light. Others will do it quietly and sell it back to you at a premium. You cannot stop the river. It is your life moving through time. But you can decide where to dig channels and where to build gates. You can refuse to let every raft pass. You can plant trees along the banks so that when storms come, breaking news, scandals, outrage waves, the roots hold. Those roots are relationships in the real world, crafts that make hours disappear without a screen, books that slow your mind into comprehension, walks that give your nervous system a reset, conversations that don't end with a link. The river will still roar some days, but you will know its shape. You will recognize which bends are yours and which were carved by someone else. Tonight, when the blue light asks for one more minute, try this experiment. Put the phone face down and ask yourself a gentle question. What did I come here to feel? If the answer is seen, find a person. If it's informed, find a source you trust and read long enough to be changed. If it's distracted, let it be intentional and finite. If it's loved, Step outside the screen and say something true to someone who can answer. The digital age won't stop singing. But you can learn the harmony that keeps you human in the chorus. And that, more than any setting or feature, is the power that outlasts the feed. A mind that notices, a heart that chooses, and a life that cannot be steered by anything you didn't consciously invite inside. Section 8. Defense against manipulation, building psychological armor. The first defense against control is not anger or toughness, it is clarity. When you can see the move, you don't need to wrestle it. You simply refuse to play. Let's begin softly, the way a careful mentor would sit beside you and speak in a calm voice after a long day. Defense is not about becoming suspicious of everything or building a fortress so thick that nothing can enter. Defense is about learning the difference between a door and a trap. It's about tuning your senses to the early signals, those slight changes in your breath, that tightening in your jaw, the way a conversation starts to bend your memory, so you can act before your agency is quietly exchanged for harmony. Most manipulation is subtle. It doesn't announce itself as a threat. It arrives as friendliness, urgency, pity, flattery, authority, certainty. Your greatest armor will be the quiet practices that keep you awake while staying kind. Noticing sooner, asking better questions, naming what you feel, and holding your ground without turning to stone. Detecting manipulation early begins in the body, not the brain. Your nervous system is an excellent scout. Pay attention to the microsignals. A sudden hurry when there's no real deadline, a fog that rolls in when everything was clear 5 minutes ago, a sense of owing someone something you did not actually agree to give, a tightening in your chest when praise is immediately followed by a request. These are not proofs. They are prompts. Pause. Breathe slower. Ask for time. When the stakes feel high and the clock gets loud, manipulation loves to ride the momentum. Slow is sovereign. The moment you step out of the rush, you return to yourself. You can feel this physically, the shoulders drop a little, the jaw loosens. This is not magic. It's permission to think. Critical thinking is your second layer of armor, not in the academic sense of winning debates, but in the practical sense of separating signal from spectacle. Begin with simple questions. What is actually being asked of me? What happens if I say no? Which facts are known, and which are storytelling? Who benefits from my urgency? What would I think if I heard the same pitch from someone I don't admire? The mind wants shortcuts, especially under pressure. Manipulation feeds those shortcuts with polished frames. Your job is not to be a cynic. It is to verify. Ask for specifics instead of slogans. Ask for numbers instead of vibes. Ask to read the contract tomorrow morning, not at midnight. In relationships, ask for behavior change rather than beautifully phrased apologies. In communities, ask for process rather than charisma. In work, ask for scope, timeline, and trade-offs, not just we'll figure it out. Critical thinking is not an attack. It's a form of care, for yourself and for the shared reality you're trying to protect. Emotional intelligence and self-awareness are shields you wear on the inside. A person with high EQ is not less emotional. They are better at naming and navigating. When someone pushes your buttons, the button itself is your teacher. If flattery makes you generous, name it. If authority makes you obedient, name it. If guilt makes you compliant, name it. Once you can say, praise lights me up, or I hate disappointing people, the lever loses some of its power because you can see your own wiring. Self-awareness also means mapping your non-negotiables beforehand, not improvising boundaries in the heat. What is your minimum sleep? What is your budget range? How many late nights can you give? Which values outrank popularity? Write these down when you are calm. When a moment arrives that threatens them, you don't have to invent courage. You execute a plan you made for your own good. Recognizing projection and gaslighting is part of keeping your story yours. Projection happens when someone attributes their feelings or motives to you, accusing you of selfishness when they're protecting their own interest, calling you controlling because you set a simple boundary, describing you as angry when you're merely firm. The temptation is to defend yourself inside their frame, explaining and explaining until you feel like you're on trial for crimes that don't fit the facts. Step out of the frame. Return to observable behavior. I hear you think I'm being selfish. Here is what I'm asking for. And here is why. If they keep moving the target, you can decline the game. I'm not discussing labels. I'm discussing plans. Gaslighting is the more corrosive cousin, denying your reality to the point where you distrust your own senses. The fix is external. Keep notes, time-stamped messages, and clear calendars. Check your memory with a neutral third party. Name the tactic without drama. You may remember it differently. This is how I remember it, and my memory matters to me. Manipulation demands that you erase yourself to keep the peace. Defense insists that your perception is not up for negotiation. Boundaries are the bones of autonomy. They're not fences to keep love out. They are doors with locks so love can feel safe inside. A good boundary is clear, kind, and enforceable. I don't take calls after 10. I won't lend money to friends. I can help on Tuesday for 1 hour. I'm not comfortable with that topic. You do not need to over-explain. You do not need to justify with a dissertation. Over-explaining is often a way of asking permission to protect yourself. You do not need permission to protect yourself. When your boundary is tested, and it will be, enforcement must be gentle and consistent. If someone texts after 10, reply the next morning without apology. If a friend asks for money, offer a different kind of help that respects your line. If a colleague keeps pressing, move the request to writing. Every time you keep your boundary without drama, you teach your nervous system that safety is something you can create, not something you must beg for. The psychology of saying no is simpler than we fear and harder than we practice. Many of us link no with danger, abandonment, anger, retaliation. The first step is to give yourself small reps. Say no where the stakes are low. No, thanks. At the store. Not this week. To a minor favor. I'm going to pass. In a group chat. Your throat might tighten the first few times. Let it. That sensation is the old script flushing out. Pair your no with a calm face and a closed mouth. Silence after a boundary is medicine. Resist the impulse to soften your no into a maybe or to pad it with guilt-laden apologies. If you want, you can offer an alternative that still honors yourself. No, but I can do this instead. Practice until your body learns that the sky doesn't fall when you protect your time, money, energy, and attention. When a bigger moment arrives, your voice will know what to do. Defense is also relational design. Choose people who can hear no without turning it into a war. Choose leaders who welcome questions. Choose workplaces that trade in clarity instead of chaos. Choose communities that model repair after conflict rather than exile. You won't always get to choose the whole environment, but you can choose your closest circle. If you are forced to remain in a manipulative system, because of family, finances, or timing, create small islands of sanity. A friend who reflects you accurately, a counselor who helps you plan, timed boundaries that you keep even when others scoff. Sanity grows where it's planted and watered regularly. Don't wait for a perfect exit to start feeding your resilience. Let's talk about scripts, because difficult conversations rarely go well without one. Scripts do not make you robotic. They make you steady. Try lines like, I don't make decisions in the moment. I'll get back to you tomorrow. I'm not available for that. I'm not debating my memory. I'm comfortable with my choice. I value our relationship, and this is my boundary. Write a few that fit your life. Practice them out loud until your mouth knows their shape. When pressure rises, reach for the script. Over time, you won't need it as often, but in the beginning, it keeps you from bargaining against yourself. Defense loves daylight. Bring hidden dynamics into view. In a sales context, say, please email me the details. I decide from documents, not calls. In a family context, say, let's write down what we agreed to. In a friendship, say, I want to revisit our expectations. In organizations, ask for meeting notes, decisions, and owners. Manipulation feeds on ambiguity. Accountability feeds on clarity. You are not being difficult when you ask for receipts. You are building a culture where confusion can't be used as a weapon. Remember, too, that not every manipulator is malicious. Some people learned pressure as a language of need. Naming this will help you refuse the tactic without condemning the person. You can say, I hear the urgency. I make better choices with time. You can say, I feel guilt rising. I won't decide from guilt. You can say, I'm noticing that compliments come before requests. I prefer direct asks. If the other person is capable of health, they will adjust. If they are not, their discomfort is data. Your compassion is real. Your boundary must be, too. Self-regulation is a shield that makes all your other defenses easier to use. Sleep enough so your tolerance isn't running on fumes. Eat so your blood sugar doesn't turn you into prey for urgency. Move your body so stress has a place to go. Breathe slowly enough that your thinking brain stays online when someone tries to hijack you with fear or flattery. These feel like simple lifestyle tips because they are, but in the context of defense, they're tactical. A regulated nervous system does not confuse intensity with importance. It can tell the difference between a real fire and a loud alarm. Be mindful of the stories that leave you exposed. I am only good if I'm helpful. Love means never disappointing anyone. Strong people never ask for time. Boundaries are selfish. These are not truths. They are training. Replace them with honest counters you can repeat when pressure rises. Generosity without consent is self-abandonment. Disappointment is survivable for both of us. Time improves my judgment. Boundaries are how I make sustained care possible. You will not always believe these lines at first. Say them anyway. Your body will catch up to your words if your actions follow. Consider, too, the early tests that healthy people pass and manipulators fail. Healthy people accept a small no without punishment. Healthy people can apologize without changing the subject to their pain. Healthy people tolerate questions and provide specifics. Healthy people don't need you to be confused for them to feel strong. Make a habit of offering these small tests early. Not to trick anyone, but to learn quickly. When someone fails softly and repeatedly, adjust your distance. Love from farther away if you must. You can care from across a boundary without folding your life into someone else's story. If you've been deeply manipulated, you may worry that your radar is broken. It isn't. It is overworked and undertrusted. Recovery begins with letting one trusted person reflect you back accurately. Borrow their eyes until yours feels steady again. Write down your truth and read it on days when fog rolls in. Choose one small place to tell the truth out loud where you used to go quiet. Healing is less a single dramatic exit and more a series of practiced returns. To your breath, to your plan, to your boundary, to people who treat your clarity as normal. There will be times when defense looks like leaving. That is not failure. That is wisdom's last tool when repair is refused. Leaving can be quiet. You don't owe a grand speech to a pattern that won't listen. Inform what must be informed. Pack your clarity. Walk. If you cannot leave yet, leave in stages. Reduce exposure, redirect energy, rebuild support, relearn calm. Each step is real progress. Each boundary kept in a hostile climate is a rehearsal for a future where boundaries are welcomed. And if you realize you have been the one applying pressure, do not despair. Armor is not only for defense. It's for integrity. Apologize without performance. Replace guilt levers with clear asks. Accept no like a grown-up. Stop using urgency as a shortcut to consent. Give people the same time and detail you want for yourself. If you need something, say so plainly and let the answer be free. Doing this might cost you fast wins. It will win you something better, relationships that do not require confusion to function. I want you to imagine your life as a house with windows open to light and a door that locks. You invite people in because hospitality is good, and you lock the door at night because safety is good. Defense against manipulation is that lock. It's not a moat or a wall. It's a simple, dependable mechanism you use without drama. You don't explain it to every passerby. You don't apologize for it when the sun goes down. You use it because you know how night works and how mornings feel when you've rested. Before we close, place a hand on your chest and ask a gentle question. What is one small boundary I can practice this week that would make my life quieter and my mind clearer? Maybe it's deciding not to answer messages after a certain hour. Maybe it's saying, I'll let you know tomorrow, whenever money is involved. Maybe it's telling someone you love, I need you to stop joking about that, and letting the silence settle. Choose one. Practice it calmly. Expect real but survivable discomfort. Give yourself the kind of encouragement you offer others. This is what armor feels like when it fits. Not heavy or dramatic, just reassuring. You stand a little taller because your spine is doing its job. In a world where persuasion often slips into pressure and warmth sometimes hides a wire, your goal is not to become hard. It is to become clear. Clarity turns traps back into doors. Clarity turns guilt back into information. Clarity turns urgency back into a choice you get to make when you are ready. And clarity, practiced daily, becomes something even stronger than armor. It becomes peace. The kind of peace that lets you be generous without fear, curious without naivety, and kind without becoming someone else's tool. Section 9. Ethics, Morality, and the Dual Nature of Power. Power reveals character the way fire reveals metal. It softens what is pure and shows the cracks in what was already brittle. The paradox is simple and dangerous. The very skills that help you protect and heal can also help you control and harm. Which way they bend is the story of your ethics, told moment by moment, when no one is watching. Let's sit with that quietly for a second. We've spent so much time naming tactics and maps that it would be easy to end by arming you only with defenses. But this chapter asks a heavier, more honest question. What will you do with what you now know? Knowledge of dark psychology is like learning where the hidden doors are in a house. You can use them to rescue someone from a burning room, or to sneak into rooms that aren't yours. You can frame choices so frightened people can breathe, or so frightened people can't think. You can read the signals in a person's voice and face and choose to soothe their fear, or to press it like a button until they give you what you want. The tools don't come stamped good or evil. Your intent and your guardrails decide what they become in your hands. Can dark psychology be used ethically? The question itself makes some people recoil, as if saying yes would be a confession and saying no would be a lie. The truth is subtler. Influence happens whenever two minds meet. You influence the mood of a room when you enter with steadiness instead of panic. You influence your child when you slow your voice so they can slow their breath. You influence your friend when you frame a setback as a challenge they have survived before. If dark psychology means only the study of what bends perception and behavior, then yes, parts of it can be used ethically. If consent is honored, autonomy is protected, and outcomes are carried by both parties without secrecy or force. Ethics lives in 3 questions you can keep near your tongue. Am I increasing the other person's freedom or reducing it? Am I making the method visible enough that they can agree with clear eyes? Am I prepared to accept their no without punishment? If you can answer yes to those questions, you are not manipulating. You are stewarding influence with care. The duality of influence is easiest to see in simple human moments. A partner knows you're overwhelmed and says, "Let's pause. You don't have to decide tonight." That's framing in service of your well-being. Another partner knows you're overwhelmed and says, "Decide now before you overthink," tightening time until your body obeys. That's framing in service of their convenience. A leader stands on a stage and uses social proof, stories of shared effort, names of quiet contributors, to expand the circle of credit and responsibility. Another leader uses the same social proof to stigmatize dissent. Everyone here knows what the right path is. The method is similar. The moral direction is inverted. Influence becomes manipulation the moment the frame hides costs, compresses alternatives, or binds your dignity to your compliance. So, is control ever justified? We are tempted to answer with absolutes because absolutes make us feel clean. But life is messy. Parents exert control to keep toddlers from running into traffic. Teachers set boundaries in classrooms so learning can happen. Surgeons insist on checklists in the operating room because a misstep can cost blood. These forms of control are justified not because power wants order, but because care requires structure. They are bounded by transparency and accountability. The rules are stated, the authority is explainable, the door to appeal exists, and the power holder can be questioned without fear. Control becomes unjustified the moment it protects itself before it protects the people in its care, the moment it refuses audit, the moment it punishes questions as if curiosity were treason. If you must restrict freedom to prevent immediate harm, you owe a plan to restore it as soon as the danger passes, and you owe witnesses who can hold you to that promise. Psychological power in leadership and relationships asks for even more humility. The best leaders do not pretend they are immune to the thrill of steering a crowd. They build systems that temper the thrill. They separate persuasion from pressure by pacing decisions, inviting counterarguments, naming trade-offs in daylight, and making promises they can survive when the cameras are off. They treat charisma as an accelerant that can burn as easily as it can warm. They check their reflections in unflattering mirrors. Mentors who are not enamored, colleagues who will speak a hard truth, communities that can say no without being shamed. In private life, the same principle applies. Love gives you access to the softest parts of a person. You will know the words that calm them and the silences that terrify them. You will know the stories that open their hope and the wounds that close their mouth. Power in love is the choice to handle that access like a trust, not a tool. If your partner's vulnerability reliably becomes leverage in arguments, you are not loving. You are extracting. If your friend's loyalty turns into a valve you twist to get labor, you are not close. You are comfortable with their discomfort. Ethics is not an idea we admire. It's a practice we do when it would be easier not to. The fine line between mastery and abuse is crossed in inches, not miles. You don't wake up a villain. You slide a little each time your goal matters more than the person in front of you. First, you justify a white lie because the truth would only confuse them. Then you skip the part where you name your interest because they'll say no if you do. Then you inflate urgency because they need a push. Then you discover how effective guilt is and start dressing requests in disappointment. By the time you look back, you have built a staircase out of tiny, reasonable steps that led you somewhere you promised you'd never go. The antidote to this drift is not heroic willpower. It's small, boring guardrails you install before the slope. Write a personal code. Mine is simple. No lies, no fog, no forced deadlines, no punishment for no. When I break one, I repair fast and in public if the harm was public. Mastery without guardrails seduces you into confusing effectiveness with goodness. But goodness is not how well you can move people. It's how well you can move yourself back to the line when effectiveness invites you to cross it. There's another paradox to hold. Sometimes your ethics will make you less efficient. You will lose a deal because you refuse to trigger fear. You will lose followers because you refuse to stage outrage. You will lose the rush of getting your way because you allowed someone else the space to find theirs. This loss is real. Count it, name it, grieve it, and then notice what you gain in its place. You gain sleep that doesn't ask questions at 3 a.m. You gain relationships that don't require you to juggle versions of the truth. You gain a reputation you don't have to constantly defend with content and charm. You gain a life in which power is not something you perform, but something you carry lightly because you know you are still yourself if it disappears. The responsibility that comes with knowledge is heavier than the pleasure of cleverness. When you learn how people work, what persuades, what frightens, what soothes, you inherit duties. The first duty is to do no avoidable harm. Harm cannot be eliminated. Human life is made of friction and misunderstanding. But avoidable harm is the damage you can see coming when you are honest with yourself. If you know a story will inflame without informing, don't tell it. If you know your words will be taken as marching orders by people who trust you, add brakes to your message so it can't be used to stampede. If you know your charm makes no harder for others, create spaces where their no is easy and private. The second duty is to disclose your interests. Hidden incentives rot trust. Say out loud what you want, what you're afraid of losing, what you gain if the group goes your way. The third duty is to make the path to disagreement safe. If people can't resist you without losing belonging, your power is already unethical, no matter how noble your goal. There will be moments when you feel the noble temptation, using dark tools for a bright cause. You might think, if I can just push them now, they'll thank me later. Or, if I scare them today, I'll save them tomorrow. Occasionally, urgency is real, but the noble temptation is addictive precisely because it feels righteous. Ask yourself the question that cuts through self-deception. Would I be comfortable if someone used this method on me for a cause I oppose? If the answer is no, you are boarding the wrong train. Step off while the platform is still close. We also have to talk about the gray places where both people believe they are right. Ethics is not tested most fiercely in the presence of cartoon villains. It is tested in contested goods, safety and freedom, speed and deliberation, loyalty and honesty. In those moments, remember that influence is not a verdict. It is a vote. Aim to persuade without pretending your frame is the only frame. Name your uncertainty alongside your conviction. Invite the other side to articulate the best version of their case before you argue the worst version you can beat. This slows you down, and the slowing will feel like weakness if you've been trained by short-form attention. It is not weakness. It's maturity. If your idea survives an honest test, it becomes stronger. If it doesn't, you rescue yourself from the arrogance of mistaking momentum for truth. What about self-protection when others do not play by your rules? Ethics does not require you to be a doormat. You can refuse to be pressured without hating the person applying pressure. You can name fog without calling the other person a monster. You can leave a system designed to use you and still bless the people inside it who are not ready to leave. It is possible to be formidable and gentle, firm and humane. The trick is to put your energy into boundaries, not into character assassination. You create clean exits and clean no's. You keep receipts without building altars to grievance. You accept that you cannot control their story about you. You return your attention to the only theater where your power is ethical by default, your own choices. In leadership especially, the dual nature of power is a daily companion. You will find that people project onto you hope, fear, enemies from old stories. If you are not careful, you will start acting for the projection instead of the person. Build rituals that bring you back to earth. Spend time with those who are immune to your aura. Children, elders, friends who knew you before your name mattered. Tell your people what you are doing to keep yourself honest. Publish decision criteria. Explain why a no was given when a yes would have been popular. Share the trade-offs you accepted. Invite audits from those who owe you nothing. This is not performance. It is prophylactic. Keeps the poison of applause from getting into your blood. For those who love someone powerful, your ethics matter too. Do not feed the part of them that confuses charisma with entitlement. Celebrate their restraint, not just their wins. Be the place where they can bring a fear or a failure without worrying it will be turned into a headline. If you are the only person who can tell them the truth and you choose not to, you have joined the chain that will pull them toward harm. Love that does not warn is not love. It is fear wearing a friendly face. Some listeners will be asking, but what about justice? Isn't there a time to use power hard? Yes. There are times when a firm hand stops a bully, when a clear boundary protects the vulnerable, when speed prevents a catastrophe, when naming a lie loudly is the only way to drain its power. Ethics does not mean softness at all times. It means alignment between your methods and your aims, and a willingness to be accountable for both. Use power to end harm, not to humiliate. Use speed to prevent damage, not to silence. Use pressure to protect a life, not to enlarge an ego. And when the moment passes, reduce force back to counsel. Power that never ramps down was never about protection in the first place. What then is mastery if not control? Mastery is the ability to choose the smallest effective dose of influence and to stop when consent ends. Mastery is pacing, timing, and truthfulness held together by responsibility. Mastery is the refusal to outsource your ethics to your emotions, refusing to justify a dirty method because it felt right in the moment. Mastery is the art of helping people meet their own values instead of replacing them with yours. It's slower. It's less cinematic. It builds fewer legends. It leaves more freedom behind. And freedom, even when it costs you the quick win, is the soil where trust grows. If you remember nothing else, remember the test that never fails. Could you explain your method, your intent, and your incentives to the person you're influencing without shame? And would you still be proud if someone you loved were treated the same way? If yes, continue. If no, you're borrowing against your own integrity, and the debt always comes due with interest. The currency it will collect is your peace of mind and the quality of your relationships. We end where we began, with the fire. Power will soften you or crack you depending on what you put into it. Put fear and you will harden. Put vanity and you will warp. Put love without boundaries and you will melt into shapelessness. Put love with boundaries and you will be forged, strong enough to hold shape, warm enough to be touched. There is nothing mystical about this. It is daily work, done in small decisions under small pressures, observed by almost no one. It is the choice to be accurate when exaggeration would win applause, to be transparent when secrecy would speed things up, to be kind without becoming pliable, to be firm without becoming cold. Tonight, ask yourself a tender, difficult question. Where have I been effective at the cost of being good? And what would it take to reverse that ratio? You don't need to confess it to a million people. Write it down. Name one repair you can make: a call, a message, a returned credit, a decision reversed, a process changed. Then ask the mirror question. Where have I been so afraid of power that I refuse to use it to protect what matters? Name one place you can step forward with clean strength. Set a boundary, speak for someone who can't, design a system that makes exploitation harder, make consent the default in your corner of the world. You will fail sometimes. You will overreach or hesitate, rationalize or collapse. When you do, don't make a monument to the failure. Make a promise. Fewer secrets, slower yes, faster apologies, sturdier no's. Power is not the enemy. Power without conscience is. Influence is not the enemy. Influence without consent is. Knowledge is not the enemy. Knowledge without responsibility is. The dual nature of power will always travel with you. Treat it like a companion who deserves respect but not the wheel. Then keep driving, eyes open, hands steady, toward a life where your impact does not require anyone else to vanish for you to feel big. That is not just ethical. It is sane. It is the only kind of power that lets you sleep, love, and lead without becoming the very problem you set out to solve. Section 10: Mastery of the Mind, Awareness, Control, and Transformation. Real freedom isn't the absence of pressure. It's the presence of clarity. When you know what's moving you, you can finally decide where to move. Take a slow breath with me and imagine this as a quiet closing room. A lamp on the table, a pen in your hand. We've spent chapters walking through shadows. How people bend truth, how systems tilt the floor, how the mind itself, eager, biased, beautifully human, can become a hall of mirrors. Tonight, we turn toward something gentler and stronger, what it looks like to live awake. Mastery of the mind is not about becoming invulnerable or hard. It's about becoming honest and steady. It's the art of carrying dark psychology awareness like a lantern rather than a weapon, using it to light paths, not scorch bridges. It's the skill of seeing the lever and choosing whether to pull it or whether to step away and let a better part of you speak. Integrating awareness into daily life begins with small rituals that remind you you're the one at the wheel. You won't control every storm. You will control your hands. In the morning, before your feed chooses your mood, choose one question. What interior quality do I want to practice today? Patience, precision, kindness, courage? Naming it puts a compass in your pocket. When the day starts negotiating with your attention, you can feel the tug and ask, does this pull serve the quality I chose? If yes, you go. If no, you bow out without writing an essay to justify your exit. At work, integrate clarity by moving seduction into daylight. Decisions in writing, timelines with trade-offs, requests with the true ask on the first line. At home, integrate care by making rules that keep love bigger than tactics. No apologies without change. No jokes that shrink someone. No deadlines that force a yes. In your friendships, integrate truth by praising in public and correcting in private, by returning borrowed stories without interest, by letting your people disappoint you without losing your respect for them. Integration is not a single grand vow. It's 100 tiny rearrangements that make manipulation inefficient and honesty fast. Reclaiming autonomy and self-direction doesn't require a war. It requires an ecosystem where your choices can breathe. Start by reclaiming the gap between stimulus and response. That is your sovereign territory. When urgency barks, you put it on a leash. I decide tomorrow. When flattery floods, you lower the tide. Thank you. Send the details. When guilt knocks, you open the door just enough to ask your central question. Did I do harm, or did I disappoint? If you harmed someone, you repair. If you only disappointed, you decline the contract shame is trying to sell. Build policies for yourself the way a wise leader would. A personal procurement process for your time. A cooling-off period for major buys and big yes. A consent checklist for your emotions. Do I understand what is being asked? Do I have the facts? Is my no allowed? Do I trust myself tomorrow to feel the same? Autonomy is not a mood. It's a structure that lets your values make decisions while your feelings calm down. How does understanding manipulation make you more authentic, not more armored? Because once you can name the game, you no longer have to play it to feel safe. The performative versions of you, the agreeable mask, the invincible costume, the always-on charisma, exist to negotiate rooms where truth felt too expensive. Awareness gives you cheaper currency. You realize you can step out of the pleasing routine and still keep love because you choose people who don't make love conditional. You realize you can tell the unvarnished number instead of the optimistic spin because you choose teams that prefer reality to morale theater. You realize you can admit doubt on a microphone because your authority comes from your alignment, not your performance. Authenticity isn't confessional excess. It's clean congruence between what you value, what you say, and what you do. When you feel that click, anxiety drops. You stop editing mid-sentence to avoid invisible punishments. Your speech slows to the pace of your breath. Your presence becomes the permission other people were waiting for. The final stage, mastering influence without corruption, sounds grand, but it lives in modest habits. You use the smallest effective dose. You present frames as frames, not as fate. You disclose your incentives before someone has to excavate them. You leave room around your words for a no to land without bruising. You refuse to recruit fear unless a real fire is at the door, and when the fire is out, you turn the siren off. You pace, offer direction, then pause. Make a case, then invite the best counter. Set a boundary, then lower your shoulders. Mastery is less a spell you cast and more a rhythm you keep. It's knowing that urgency is a scalpel, appropriate in surgery, reckless at dinner. It's choosing friction on the right side of the equation, adding enough slowness and specificity that consent becomes active and ownership is shared. It's resisting the cheap electricity of outrage when steadiness will carry more truth farther. You might worry that this gentler mastery won't work in a world that often rewards spectacle. Sometimes it won't. You will lose quick wins that were only winnable through fog. But you will gain something better than momentum. You will gain compounding trust. Trust is slow power. It does not trend. It lasts. It attracts people who hate tricks, clients who choose clarity, collaborators who can apologize without theater, communities that correct themselves in public and therefore don't have to collapse in private. This is influence that doesn't boomerang into regret at 3 in the morning. It won't always be glamorous. It will be livable. Self-mastery as the highest form of power begins with the simplest mirror. What moves me most easily, and who gets to own that lever? If praise moves you, give yourself honest praise for process, not just results, so other people's approval becomes a spice, not a staple. If fear of conflict moves you, give yourself structured rehearsals. Practice 5 calm no's a day, so your throat learns that disagreement is survivable. If scarcity moves you, put numbers on paper. Reality is less terrifying than fog. If belonging moves you, choose circles where belonging is not rented by conformity but earned by contribution. Power over the self is not a sterile discipline. It's a warm, consistent parenting of your impulses. You set bedtimes for your habits. You cook your attention real meals and stop feeding it candy. You speak to yourself in a tone you would be proud to overhear. You forgive quickly and correct concretely. You do not bribe yourself with shame into being better. You build a life where your better choices are easier to reach. Integrating all of this, day after day, produces a strange and beautiful side effect. You become harder to move unfairly and easier to move well. Good arguments change your mind. Cheap tactics don't. Real urgency wakes your speed. Fake urgency meets your pause. Genuine authority earns your deference. Costume authority earns your questions. You start noticing the difference between intensity and importance, between charisma and character, between certainty and accuracy. Your inner weather stabilizes. You spend less time repairing the damage of rushed yes and more time building the things your values wanted all along. Deep work, durable bonds, projects that outlast you, moments that taste like life when you're in them instead of content you watch later to remember you were there. To live this way, you'll need a few anchors you can carry anywhere. The first is presence. When you are present, manipulation must work harder because there is less dream in you to hijack. Presence comes back with breath. Comes back with touch, feet on the floor, palm on your chest, the felt sense that you are in a body, not just in a browser. The second is language. Keep a pocket full of phrases that bring you back to agency. I decide when I'm calm. I'm not debating my memory. I need the terms in writing. That doesn't work for me. I don't make decisions from fear. The third is witness. One person who remembers you when you forget. If you can't name them right now, that is your next mission, not a savior, a mirror. The fourth is audit. A weekly review where you ask simple questions. Where did I abandon myself? Where did I keep myself? What pattern is trying to come back? What tiny adjustment would make next week kinder and clearer? Mastery is not dramatic. It's repetition under love. There is a softer, more luminous part of this conversation. The light within the darkness. You did not study these tactics to become a collector of enemies. You studied them to stop abandoning yourself and to stop treating other people as means to your ends. The light is not naivety. It's chosen clarity. It's the moment you decide to be the person in the room who slows panic without belittling it, who asks better questions without sneering, who leaves when the price of staying is your self-respect, who apologizes cleanly when you take the easy road and then walks back to the harder path because your values are there waving you home. The light is knowing that you can be strategic without being secretive, influential without being invasive, decisive without being domineering. It is knowing that you can be moved by love and choose not to be moved by shame, that you can be guided by fear when it is accurate and refuse to be governed by it when it is convenient for someone else. Maybe you are thinking about a chapter of your life where you did not live like this. Welcome to the club of everyone honest. Forgive yourself without editing the truth. If you manipulated, own it and repair what you can. If you were manipulated, grieve what you gave away and bless the part of you that was only trying to survive. Then mark today as a hinge. Decide how your influence will feel in other people's bodies. Decide how your rooms will tilt when you walk in. Decide what your attention will fund. Decide what kind of no you will teach your children to say by the way you say yours. This is how culture changes. Not in viral declarations, but in the quiet stubbornness of people who refuse to trade clarity for speed, dignity for compliance, truth for theater. Let's make it practical before we close. Tomorrow, when your phone lights up and offers you a mood, lay it face down for 1 minute and ask, what state would I like to bring to the world? Choose it. Let your actions feed it. Fewer tabs, more depth. Fewer reactions, more responses. Fewer promises, more kept ones. When someone reaches for your lever, fear, praise, urgency. Practice your smallest effective counter. Time, detail, breath. When you feel the old performance rising, choose one sentence more honest than the one you were about to say. When you meet someone who leads with clarity, reward them with yours. When you meet someone who leads with fog, reward them with your boundary. When you miss all of this and catch yourself later, practice the most advanced move of all. An undramatic course correction. No self-indictment. No victory parade. Just a return. Mastery of the mind will not make the world stop trying to sway you. It will make you a poor target and a rich ally. People will learn they don't need to bend you to get your help. They can bring you the truth and receive your best. Systems will learn you are not exploitable at scale. You are thoughtful at your own pace. Your future self will learn you can be trusted with your own power. That's the quiet revolution. It doesn't trend. It accumulates. It builds a life you don't need a vacation from and relationships you don't need to recover from. It creates days that feel like yours because they are. As we end this journey, remember the simplest paradox we began with. Freedom is not the absence of pressure. It is the presence of clarity. Keep your lantern. Keep your pace. Keep the little scripts that make big rooms fair. Keep people who treat your no as normal and your yes as sacred. Keep a soft heart and a firm spine. Keep learning how your levers work and handing them carefully to the parts of you that won't sell you out for applause. And when it gets loud, and it will, step into that small sovereign country between stimulus and response and reign there kindly. From that place, you can love without losing yourself. You can lead without stealing anyone's center. and you can walk through the dark without needing it to disappear before you move. That is mastery. Not a crown, not a stage, just a steady hand on your own life. If this journey touched something true in you, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe now so the thread between us stays alive. Every new chapter opens another hidden door of the mind. Tap like if this work resonated. Likes aren't just numbers. They're a signal we're on the right path. And share this with someone who's hungry for truth behind the masks. Let the circle widen. Let the light spread through the dark. Turn on the notification bell. One click, and we'll meet you at the right moment, when the city quiets and the story begins to speak. This is Dark Audio Vision, where we say what isn't said and light what isn't seen. Subscribe, like, share. Then breathe slowly. The next descent goes deeper.